Chapter 38-33. A pocket watch with a golden chain was hanging on his chest. The pocket watch was in his chest pocket. Ning Shu was speechless. The white tuxedo and the pale face of His Excellency complemented each other. It was a horrible visual experience to see a charcoal head wearing a white tuxedo. An abyssal prefect's figure and looks were something that could be hidden by any kind of clothing. In the past, His Excellency was low-key and mysterious. The black tuxedo made him look cold and unapproachable. But when he wore the white tuxedo, it could be seen from afar. Such a move showed that His Excellency subconsciously wanted to attract people's attention. Only males in the courtship period would dress themselves up. They would show off as much as they could to attract people's attention. Ning Shu's expression became a bit meaningful. His Excellency's expression was still indifferent. He looked around the whole world of samsara and said, "Your world of samsara is so simple." Ning Shu accepted it humbly. "It's like this. I can't do anything for the time being. That's all I can do." It was a great honor to put down so many things in the world of samsara and come to this corner of her place. If you have something to do, you have to do it all at once. You don't have to run around. Ning Shu nodded. Yes, you're right." His Excellency looked at Ning Shu and frowned. He felt that her reaction was a bit strange, but he didn't think too much about it. He said, "He has entered the critical period of cultivation. If it's not something important, don't look for him." Ning Shu asked the little devil, "Is that so? You've entered the critical period?" He felt that His Excellency didn't want her to look for the little devil. After all, Ning Shu's ears were full of goosebumps. The little devil nodded. "Yes, if it goes well, I can stabilize my form." "If it fails," Ning Shu hurriedly asked, "what will happen if it fails?" The little devil said, "I will probably stay in this form forever." Ning Shu said, "There's nothing wrong with this form. You'll be young forever." She was the dream of many women, forever young and beautiful. Imp and His Excellency glared at Ning Shu at the same time, and His Excellency said, "This also means that his strength is fixed, and there is no way for him to increase his strength. How can an adult's strength compare to a teenager's strength?" Ning Shu was silent for a moment before he said, "I see. Then do your best. What do you need? What energy do you need?" Transforming would definitely require energy. Ning Shu touched his pockets, wondering if he still had any energy bodies on him. "I've already prepared everything," the abyssal prefect replied. Ning Shu, "Good luck then." The abyssal prefect said, "Take a good look at this world and see if there's anything wrong with it. Don't call anyone else for the time being." Ning Shu nodded, "Sure, but I don't know what's wrong with the world of reincarnation." His Excellency glanced at her, his eyes filled with disdain. "Don't you know how to check? Maybe there are some worlds with huge problems." Abyssal prefect, "From now on, even if there's a problem with the world and it's about to explode, don't call for help." Ning Shu was speechless. Her expression was a bit indescribable. Abyssal prefect said, "If there's a problem, then solve it. If it can't be solved, then let nature take its course. Is it the doctor's fault if a person dies of cancer?" Ning Shu was speechless and began to check each world. The abyssal prefect and the little demon also followed. Ning Shu checked the worlds while paying attention to the abyssal prefect and the little demon. He was used to the abyssal prefect's black clothes, so when he looked at the white clothes again, he felt a bit strange. Moreover, the white clothes reflected a faint halo that surrounded the abyssal prefect, making him seem like a soft light. It was simply too dazzling. The young demon beside him was a head taller than the abyssal prefect. He walked casually, full of youthful vigor. When the two walked together, it always felt like there was a gap between them. The abyssal prefect was a strict elder who didn't smile at all. Perhaps when the little demon experienced the transformation this time, this feeling of gap between them would disappear. After checking all the worlds of reincarnation, Ning Shu asked, "Is there a problem with the world?" This was a world that had just been born, so there should be very few problems. The abyssal prefect nodded, "There's no problem." He turned to the little demon and said, "Let's go back." The little demon winked at Ning Shu. The abyssal prefect turned to the little demon and said, "Go back, or stay and play." The little demon left with the abyssal prefect. Ning Shu was thinking, why is the little demon winking at me? Is there a hint? Ning Shu scratched his head. He was really confused. Forget it, let's not think about it. After solving the problem of Nine Palace Mountain and the world of reincarnation, he felt relaxed and happy. Ning Shu returned to the system space. The system notified him to go to the worlds to collect resources. Ning Shu. I'm so weak. I just dealt with the Star Stone. Ning Shu also planned to go to the Sacred Land. He had the wooden tablet in hand, so he could go to the cub's place to learn about the sacred runes. Didn't you absorb the soul power? Since you're leaving the organization, you should do what you need to do. Ning Shu sneered, "I think it's because I'm free labor now, so you're ordering me around." The system said, "What's the problem? Only a fool wouldn't order you around. Also, you said you're leaving here. Do you want me to sympathize with you?" Wow, it made sense. He was speechless. It felt like they had shed all pretense of cordiality. Ning Shu said, "I'm about to leave. Do you still expect me to be cautious and conscientious for the organization? This is a deal. If you do something that doesn't satisfy us, the deal will be cancelled. The wooden tablet will also be cancelled. As for your companions, they won't be able to find the sacred land." Ning Shu clicked his tongue and said to Dan Qing, "I'm going to do missions now." The two big bosses were fighting. Dan Qing trembled and said, "There are no missions now." Ning Shu, what about the backlog of missions from before? He said there were a lot of missions. Ning Shu didn't make things difficult for Dan Qing. He was going to leave missions in the future, but Dan Qing was going to stay in the organization. Dan Qing was just a branch system. It was too easy for a huge organization to crush her. Of course, it was also easy to crush her. Whether he could leave the organization or not depended on how much his strength could improve during this period of time. Ning Shu was hesitant about leaving the organization because he didn't have enough strength. He didn't know if he would really be free or if he would be free in the form of death. All the choices and hesitations were because he didn't have enough money or strength. Ning Shu went to the void and followed a group of people into a plane that was about to shatter. He collected the resources in the plane. When he landed in the same place as a big boss. The big boss said to Ning Shu, "Let's go together." Ning Shu looked at him and nodded. Okay. Chapter 38-34. Ning Shu didn't know this mission enforcer. Since he invited her, she immediately agreed. Ning Shu wasn't worried that other people would have bad intentions towards her. After all, she was arrogant and had the ability to deal with everything that happened. Along the way, the mission enforcer kept looking at Ning Shu. Ning Shu touched her face. Was he looking at her face? She knew that she had become good-looking. She was elated. When the man turned his head to peek at Ning Shu again, he happened to meet Ning Shu's eyes. He was stunned for a moment and quickly looked away. Ning Shu went straight to the point and asked, "Why are you looking at me? Is there something wrong with me? Was she too beautiful?" He waved his hand and said, "No, don't think too much." "Ning Shu, I'm already thinking too much. If you have something to say, just say it. You're peeking at me again and again. Isn't it awkward?" Ning Hyusu said directly. "Mission enforcer, it wasn't awkward at first, but now that you said it, it was awkward. There's something I don't know if I should ask." The man's expression was a little hesitant. Ning Shu said firmly, "You shouldn't ask. If you want to ask, just ask. Why are you talking about this? Mission Enforcer, then I'll ask. I heard that you can leave the organization. Is this true? The man asked. Ning Shu's expression was a little shocked. What kind of speed was this? How long had it been? How did everyone know about it? Ning Shu couldn't help but look down and check her body. Were there a lot of listening devices on her body? This was too much. Mission Enforcer, Ning Shu obviously denied this matter. Then, she covered her mouth and giggled. Of course not. This is purely a rumor. How could there be such a thing? It's too ridiculous. Of course, she would deny such a secret. In this situation, Ning Shu had plans to resign. In the end, everyone in the company knew that she was going to resign. This feeling was really fucked up. The mission enforcer saw that Ning Shu denied it and said, "This is actually not a big deal. I heard that you were able to leave this organization, and many people have asked you what method you used. Once you entered this organization, you would be a member of the organization in life and a ghost in death. There was no such thing as leaving." Therefore, when Ning Shu's incident came out, even if it was just a rumor, it caused a huge commotion. This organization only allowed people to enter and not leave. It was impossible to leave. Ning Shu still denied it. There's no such thing. But that kind of situation is just like a fit of pique. Do you really think I can leave? The man looked hesitant. That's unlikely. He looked at Ning Shu and thought about the huge organization. Finally, he shook his head. It's not possible. Ning Shu, yes. This matter was between her and the organization. It had nothing to do with anyone else. She didn't want to cause an uproar. Obviously, after this incident, the people's hearts wavered. If the organization directly detained her in the organization in order to stabilize the people's hearts, or even killed a chicken to warn the monkeys, then she would really be too wronged. This was something that was very likely to happen. If she was an uncontrollable variable, she would put herself in the shoes of others. If she was in the organization, she would also eliminate this uncontrollable variable. However, the sources of information and the extent of gossip in the organization deeply shocked Ning Shu. There was a feeling of no privacy. However, at the same time, people like Taishu Sangliang would definitely have countless eyes focused on them to infer or obtain information. Ning Shu asked indifferently. Many people asked if there were many people who wanted to leave the organization. Humans were social animals. When they really gathered together, they would think of ways to leave. The mission enforcer's expression didn't seem to care. He didn't notice that Ning Shu was expressionless, but his ears were pricked up. Yes, when you were weak, there was no way to leave. When you have a little strength, you want to be the master of the organization. You want to leave this springboard and jump to a higher place. He said it more bluntly. The organization was like a springboard. Borrowing the organization to gain strength, paying strength and labor, and gaining strength from the organization. It was like ordinary people. They worked to make money, and the money they earned could be used to buy the materials they needed to survive. When they reached a certain level, they wanted to jump to a better life and obtain more generous rewards. However, in reality, the people in the organization couldn't jump off this springboard and jump to another board because of their lack of strength. They were indignant and helpless. It was too real. The instrument in Ning Shu's hand made a beeping sound. Apparently, it had detected that there was metal or other resources under his feet. Ning Shu ended the topic and said, "Let's start collecting the materials now." The man's expression was a little hesitant. Apparently, he didn't get any accurate information from Ning Shu. However, he couldn't get any more information from Ning Shu. He just nodded and started collecting materials with Ning Shu. After collecting the mineral deposit, Ning Shu thought that the man would separate from him. However, he kept following him. It seemed that he planned to keep following him. Ning Shu couldn't chase him away. Besides, it was very normal for mission enforcers to cooperate and do missions together. The mission enforcer asked Ning Shu, "I heard that there's a problem with the judge's body." Ning Shu looked curious. He sighed as if he had never heard of such news. He asked with a confused expression, "There's a problem with the judge's body?" The man's expression was a little indescribable. At that time, many people were watching. You picked her up like a chicken and gnawed on her soul. She actually looked as if she just found out. It was really intoxicating. Although the army quickly came and isolated that position, many people were watching at that time. The person involved actually had such an expression. "Didn't your soul power get gnawed?" the mission enforcer asked. Ning Shu nodded. "Yes, there's a problem with my body." It was undeniable that the Grand Uncle was the organization's stabilizing force. This mission enforcer was obviously testing her. Ning Shu didn't want the organization to fall into chaos while he was in it. If it did, it would definitely affect him. If he could leave the organization safely, he didn't want to run away like a drowning dog. But he's covered in black fog. It's obvious that he's not in a normal state. Ning Shu's expression was very calm. "Is that so? Being covered in black fog is indeed abnormal. Isn't that cool?" Mission enforcer, was this guy's brain really eaten by the judge? How could he be cool? It was a little hard to communicate with him. How did he have the strength? How did he survive the judge's mouth? Brainless. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 38-35. The mission enforcer's expression became a little strange. Obviously, he didn't expect Ning Shu to be such an idiot. His questions were completely irrelevant. He asked a few questions, but none of them had a definite answer. However, he was still very afraid that she could escape from the judge's evil mouth. Whether she was a real retard or a fake retard, she was still alive. Whether it was luck or strength, being alive was the greatest victory. Looking at the state of the judge at that time, he should have been able to swallow her alive. Ning Shu thought for a while and asked the man, "You seem to be very concerned about the judge." The man glanced at Ning Shu. "Don't you care? In this organization, who doesn't care about the judge?" His words were equivalent to not saying anything. Well, the judge was the center of attention. Whether it was fear, or hatred, they were all staring at the Grand Uncle. This was because the Grand Uncle represented the power of the entire organization, the most powerful and insurmountable power. Even people like Sang Liang and Uncle Chang, and even His Excellency, weren't as eye-catching as the Grand Uncle. When the image of the Grand Uncle collapsed, it meant that the organization had collapsed. The Grand Uncle represented the organization, and the organization represented the Grand Uncle. Ning Shu smiled like a fool. "That's right. Everyone is paying attention to the Grand Uncle." The man asked jokingly, "The Grand Uncle treated you like that? Do you hate him?" "Many people I know hate him." Ning Shu shook his head. "It's good that I'm still alive. I don't dare to think about anything else. I can't help it. I'm very timid. I don't even dare to look at him." The man was speechless. What kind of monster woman was he talking to? It was so tiring. Ning Shu rolled his eyes in his heart. He didn't reveal any information, but they wanted to get information from her. Who did they think he was a fool? Even if Ning Shu was a fool, he should know that these people were asking about the Grand Uncle in a roundabout way. Obviously, someone in the organization used the Grand Uncle as a target and was now aiming at him. Ning Shu didn't show it on his face, but he was gloating in his heart. The Grand Uncle was busy enough. If he said that he hated Senior Uncle, would he be recruited into a mysterious group? Ning Shu actually had a feeling of eagerness in his heart. "Brother, hurry up and invite me." It was just a matter of whether or not he wanted to take him in. Should he show off his strength? If there was truly someone in the organization that rebelled and wanted to replace them, then it could only be said that that person was a fool, and the problem of the Sea of Laws was already out of the question. Furthermore, what was the point of fighting for it? How much effort did it take to maintain such a large organization? Even if such a large organization seemed to have a lot of power, when it came to defending against external enemies, no amount of souls could compare to the void creatures. Some of the void creatures were also grouped together, and the human soul had no chance of winning. Ning Shu couldn't help but think that since the organization had existed for so many years, there must have been outstanding talents and arrogant humans who wanted to replace them, but the organization remained the same. He must have suppressed wave after wave of people, but there must be a lot of people who were rebellious or didn't dare to submit to others. Perhaps it would appear from time to time. This kind of situation could not be stopped. Now that senior uncle's situation didn't seem good, he might be able to succeed. Ning Shu's imagination had already spread to the scene of the two sides fighting and blood flowing like a river. Neither of them could get what they wanted from the other. All they got was some vague and uncertain information. However, Ning Shu got an important piece of information. Compared to the greedy wolf star who shouted about freedom and blah blah blah, he was just a flowery talker. In fact, there really was such a group in the dark, a hidden force. The organization definitely knew about it. When you didn't cause trouble, they couldn't be bothered with you. If you were asked to do something, you would do it. That was the organization's purpose, not to be friends with you and have a toast. Letting you enter the organization was to let you do things. Once you did things and completed the mission, it was fine. However, if you caused trouble, sorry, the organization would directly destroy you. Whether it was to get rid of the organization or to replace it, it was a very difficult thing. The man also wanted to ask how Ning Shu escaped from the jaws of death, but it was obvious that he wouldn't say anything even if he asked. It was somewhat irritating, but there were some words that were too blunt and inappropriate. In short, if he wasn't a trustworthy person, there were some words that couldn't be said. If he said it vaguely, the other party might not understand, or he might understand, but he would play dumb. On the contrary, he would reveal too much information on his side. Ning Shu and the man looked at each other and smirked. The man turned his head and said, "I think it's better for us to search separately. We'll find more resources." Ning Shu nodded. "I think so too. It's better to search separately." The man was impatient to follow Ning Shu. If he couldn't get useful information from Ning Shu, there was no point in following him. The figure of the mission enforcer disappeared. The smile on Ning Shu's face disappeared directly. He became cold and curled his lips. Regardless of whether it was a fight between immortals or not, he wouldn't participate in the battle between them. Maybe he would become cannon fodder. He had no choice but to become cannon fodder for the organization. If he took the initiative to become cannon fodder for another small organization, that would be really stupid. It didn't matter whether she hated the grand uncle or not. Could it be that they had a common enemy? Ning Shu clicked her tongue. She worked hard to be strong for freedom and to be lazy. She didn't want to be driven by others to do some inexplicable things. Ning Shu put this matter to the back of his mind and began to search for resources. Without anyone nagging beside him, Ning Shu's search speed increased a lot. When the end notice came, Ning Shu left the world that was about to shatter with a lot of materials. Ning Shu handed over the materials. He was a little envious of the others. Everyone else had been paid, but he didn't. For hundreds of years, he had been working for free, no matter what he did. However, he could enter the Holy Land. This was a good deal. Fa Tian could enter the cub's home and come into contact with the sacred tree and sacred patterns. This was another kind of power. If he dared to live for hundreds of years in vain, he wouldn't suffer at all. Moreover, if he could really leave the organization in the future, he could also enter the Holy Land. The Holy Land was also a shelter. Ning Shu felt a little hot in his heart. He reached into his heart and took out the peerless martial art that was like a square glass material. It was the size of a Rubik's cube. Now, the peerless martial art was hot all over. It was so hot that Ning Shu flipped his left hand and right hand. What was going on? Why was it so hot? Was it because there was insufficient energy? Generally, red and hot was a warning, and it was a warning that was more dangerous. Ning Shu quickly returned to the system space and put the peerless martial art on the coffee table. The temperature was so high that it began to melt the coffee table. How to lower the temperature? To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 38-36. Ning Shu felt that the peerless martial art might have caught a cold and had a high fever. What should he do now? Should he get some cold medicine, cool it down physically, put a wet towel on it, or wipe it with alcohol? Ning Shu rubbed his chin and pondered. As the temperature of the peerless martial art got higher and higher, Ning Shu became more and more anxious. What should he do? The peerless martial art was too important. It was related to her strength. If something happened to the peerless martial art, her soul would be gone. She would become an incomplete soul. This referred to the soul, not the power of the soul. Half of the soul arranged. The power of the soul was the source of the soul. Ning Shu rubbed his chin and began to tremble. He could not help but say to the peerless martial art, "Ancestor, if you have any requests, just say it. Don't make any noise. I don't understand." The peerless martial art had already stabilized and continued to heat up. Ning Shu was about to be roasted. As for the coffee table, it had already turned into a pool of liquid. How could it explode with such a high temperature when it lacked energy? Heat was also energy. Could it be that the peerless martial art had eaten too much? Ning Shu tried his best to personify the peerless martial art in order to deduce the situation. When a person ate too much, they would either vomit some or poop some. In the end, the energy had to be expelled from the body. Only then would it be more comfortable. If it was stuffed in the body, it would cause problems. Did that mean that he could ignore it? Ning Shu was still a little confused. While the peerless martial art was emitting heat, its body was also gradually shrinking. Previously, it was still imitating its size, but now it was smaller. Could it be that the peerless martial art was tempering itself into steel? After being hammered, a large piece of iron would become smaller and smaller, but its quality would become better and better. Damn, Ning Shu felt that he was about to be comfortable. Why was his heart not so anxious anymore? Perhaps the psychological comforting effect was really quite useful. Ning Shu, who did not know what to do, could only look at the peerless martial art. After all, he had to experience these things himself. Ning Shu did not want to run to others and ask whenever he encountered something. In the future, when he left the organization, there would be no one to answer his questions. He would need people. This kind of habit was fatal. He could not rely on others. Otherwise, when he left, he would be at a loss. As long as the peerless martial arts didn't explode, it wasn't a big deal. The greatest loss was losing half of his soul and the power provided by his peerless martial arts. Ning Shu clutched his chest and asked himself honestly. He didn't feel any trepidation, so there probably wasn't any danger. At the very least, half of his soul power was bound to the peerless martial art. The other half of his soul power did not fluctuate or disappear. Ning Shu steadied his mind and distanced himself from the peerless martial arts. This kind of roasting was truly unbearable. He felt as if his soul was about to melt. Everything in the system space had been roasted, and even the air was distorted. Dan Qing coughed and wanted to say something, but he fell silent. Ning Shu was still waiting for him to speak, but he fell silent. Ning Shu asked, "What do you want to say?" Dan Qing, "No, I just coughed a little." Ning Shu, "I'll be damned if I believe you. I obviously wanted to say something, but I held it back. Don't you feel bad? It's fine if you don't want to say it. Ning Shu stared straight at the peerless martial arts. The peerless martial arts became smaller and smaller, until it was the size of a fingernail. If he looked carefully, he wouldn't be able to see it at all. It couldn't get any smaller. If it was really so small that it couldn't be seen, it wouldn't be easy to find. Gradually, the peerless martial arts stopped emitting heat. When the temperature in the system space dropped, Ning Shu walked over and pulled out something the size of a small diamond from the liquid glass. Ning Shu pinched the small diamond between his thumb and index finger, feeling a little helpless. Such a big book became smaller and smaller, until it was as small as a 1-carat diamond. The speed at which it became beautiful and shiny after slimming down was very enviable. Ning Shu looked at the small diamond and didn't know where to put it. It was too easy to lose it. After thinking about it, he directly put it on his ear. He could touch it with his hand. He reinforced the peerless martial arts again and again to prevent it from being lost. Although he could sense the soul inside the peerless martial arts, if he met someone who knew what it was and picked it up, he could directly erase the soul inside. Just like how she erased the consciousness of the god-beating whip. Ning Shu entered the peerless martial arts. From the outside, the peerless martial arts became smaller, but inside, the world became bigger. The water of the peerless martial arts reached his knees and spread far and wide. Very good, with water, life will be born. Water is the source of life. It seemed that the peerless martial arts was about to form a world of life. He must take good care of the peerless martial arts. After exiting the peerless martial arts, Ning Shu cleaned up the system space. He threw away the books that were burned black. After thinking about it, he also threw away the bookshelves. These things piled up in the system space would only make it more crowded. The bookshelves and books were all deformed or turned black from the high temperature, but the little mouse statue was actually fine. It was still so starry. With its hands on its hips and head raised, it looked very arrogant. It was shining like stars. Ning Shu found a box and placed the little mouse statue inside. Then, he took it out. Since the little mouse's resurrection needed energy, should he just throw it into the spirit pool? The water in the spirit pool was spiritual liquid. Maybe it could even increase the vitality and energy of the little mouse. With a plop, Ning Shu threw the statue into the pool. The fish in the pool were startled, and the lotus flowers swayed. Ning Shu glanced at it and turned around to clean up. He paused and thought, that's not right. The little mouse was made of mud, and its ashes were also mud. The water wouldn't melt the little mouse. Ning Shu scooped up the statue and wiped the water stains on it. He looked at it carefully, but it didn't seem to have changed. He put the statue back into the box, closed it, and threw it into the cupboard. He bought a new coffee table. This time, he bought a more expensive one. At least it could resist the high temperature. He cleaned the entire system space inside and out, paying special attention to the nooks and crannies. Dan Qing coughed again as if he had bronchitis. Ning Shu ignored him. Let's see who can't hold it in. After a while, Dan Qing finally spoke. I heard that you're leaving the organization. Ning Shu said indifferently, you're the second person to ask me this. She could imagine that there would probably be more people asking her in the future. She remembered that she didn't say anything about this to Dan Qing. It was probably during the confrontation with the Grand Elder. As a system, Dan Qing naturally knew what happened. Ning Shu said, you're too naive. Don't you know what the organization is like? Do you think it's possible? Dan Qing really didn't know how to answer. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 38-37. She said that she couldn't leave, but the organization seemed to have admitted that she could leave after the transaction. She said that she could leave, but it seemed that no one had ever been able to leave the organization. Therefore, this was a very uncertain matter. It was even an impossible matter. Dan Qing didn't know what to say for a moment. Ning Shu asked, "Why are you asking this?" Dan Qing didn't seem to be very strong. She was sandwiched between the organization and her. She wasn't on the same side as her mission enforcer. Therefore, Ning Shu was really very curious. Dan Qing said, "I'm just curious. If you leave, where should I go?" Looking at it this way, it was reasonable for Dan Qing to ask if he could leave. Ning Shu said, "If, and I'm saying if, I can really leave in the future, I will speak up for you." Dan Qing was speechless. There was a suffocating silence. Dan Qing said honestly, "You've already left the organization. They won't care about what you say at all. You're leaving a company and still saying that you're interfering in the company's affairs for the benefit of a relative or friend. Who the hell are you?" Ning Shu nodded. "You're right. I really don't know what to say now. Besides, it's very unlikely that I can leave the organization." In the future, no matter who asked about this matter, Ning Shu only had one answer, which was to deny it 3 times. No, it's impossible. If you ask again, I'm going to get angry. Go ask the organization. Why are you all asking me? Ning Shu took out the wooden token and said to Dan Qing, "I'm going to the Holy Land. I'll do the mission when I come back." Dan Qing said a little pitifully, "You have to come back quickly. There are really a lot of missions in the inventory. Every time during the review, I feel like I'm a dead person." Ning Shu comforted her. "It's okay. Nothing will happen. You'll definitely pass the passing line." Dan Qing said, "But every time, I'm trembling in fear. I don't know how many missions there are this time. The number of missions you complete is always fluctuating back and forth. It's very dangerous. Do you understand the feeling of walking on a tightrope? Do you understand my pain and suffering?" Every time the review was conducted, it was completely capricious to determine the number of missions. If it was not completed, Right now, even if Ning Shu didn't complete the mission, he wouldn't lose much. However, it was different for him. He had to bear the responsibility of watching over and urging the unfavorable situation. If it was possible, Dan Qing really wanted to kneel down in front of Ning Shu. "Dad, can we not be so reckless?" Hearing the pain in Dan Qing's voice, Ning Shu could not help but reflect. Did she really give Dan Qing so much pressure and pain? Ning Shu said, "I will definitely do enough in the future and work hard to clear the inventory." The main thing was that she was really busy with too many things and had too many things to worry about. In the past, he was just an ordinary mission giver. The only thing he did was to complete missions, and complete missions. Under such circumstances, there would definitely be a lot of missions to complete. Ning Shu said to Dan Qing, "How about this? I'll ask the organization to assign fewer missions to me. After all, I still have other things to do. In other aspects, picking up fragments or handling stellar stones will reduce your responsibility." In fact, no matter what she did, she wouldn't get paid. No matter what she did, it would be the same. If she did less, she would do more. The weight would definitely not be reduced. It might even be more. Dan Qing was silent. Ning Shu asked, "Can't you do that?" Dan Qing said, "Thank you. I don't know if it will work. It should work." There were even fewer people picking up fragments and handling stellar stones. As for missions, there were too many mission givers in the entire organization who could do missions. Ning Shu opened the chat system and told the main system about this. The two of them bargained. Ning Shu wanted to reduce the number of missions by half, but Sang Liang could only reduce it by 20%. The bottom line was 20%. As for handling stellar stones and picking up fragments of the world, other than when doing missions, he would be available whenever he was called. If he needed you, he had to appear. Ning Shu was confused. What was the difference? He had always been available whenever he was called. Could it be that the frequency of being available would increase? It was very likely. 20% was 20%. Ning Shu said to Dan Qing, the number of missions has been reduced by 20%. Dan Qing was speechless. How should she react? You're awesome. Should I applaud you? Dan Qing said, that's good. You can go. Ning Shu took the wooden sign out of the system space and jumped into the void. Then, he found the entrance to the Holy Land according to the instructions on the wooden sign. Entering the Holy Land, a wild and ancient aura hit him in the face. There was no technology at all. Even the houses were piled up with undecorated stones. The divine patterns on the buildings and even on the ground gave this place a sense of mystery. Ning Shu found the cub's shelter and saw a few people standing at the door of the shelter from a distance. One of them was Senior Uncle in a trench coat, and the other was Sang Liang. Opposite them was an old man with gray hair and a long beard. Ning Shu stopped and looked at them from a distance. He couldn't hear what they were saying. After talking for a while, Senior Uncle and Sang Liang left. When the two of them were far away, Ning Shu walked to the door of the cub's shelter. He didn't want to meet Senior Uncle and the others for the time being. If there was a conflict, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Ning Shu said to the old man with gray hair, Senior, I'm here to see Fa Tian. The old man was stooped and supported himself with an undecorated cane. The whole cane was covered with divine patterns, like the patterns of trees. Thinking that he was the spiritual body of the divine tree, Ning Shu was in awe. The old man tilted his head and whispered to Ning Shu, what did you say? Ning Shu smiled faintly. What the hell was this reverence? Ning Shu said again, Senior, I'm looking for Fa Tian. The old man exclaimed and looked at Ning Shu blankly with his turbid eyes. Ning Shu exhaled and shouted, I'm here to see Fa Tian, Fa Tian, God. It was heart-wrenching and deafening. Fa Tian, who was in the cub's shelter, should have heard it. However, there was a barrier between the door and the door, so he shouldn't be able to hear it. The old man nodded. You're looking for Fa Tian. I'll call him. Then, he walked slowly and leisurely, taking a step every half a day. With his hunched back, he could only take one step every half a day. Ning Shu was too embarrassed to rush him. Was he really too old, or was he doing it on purpose? The old man walked into the barrier. After a long time, he came out and said to Ning Shu, oh, I forgot. Fa Tian is not in the cub's shelter. He went out. Ning Shu. Suddenly, his temper was gone and he was calm. Ning Shu asked, where did Fa Tian go? What did he do? The old man, what did you say? Ning Shu shouted, Fa Tian went out and asked for leave, right? What did he go out for? I'm so worried. To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to, mobile address. Chapter 38:38. Could it be that Fa Tian went out to collect ashes again? Was it really a good idea to run out like this? There were many powerful existences in the void. But thinking about Fa Tian's strength and the bottles that Fa Tian collected, it was obvious that this was not the first time he went out. Ning Shu planned to wait here for Fa Tian to come back. Ning Shu looked at the old man and took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket. As for where he got the cigarettes, he. Ning Shu took out a cigarette and handed it to the old man. Senior, do you smoke? Ning Shu was afraid that the old man could not hear him clearly, so he shouted very loudly, causing the passers-by to look at Ning Shu strangely. Oh my God, this is a little embarrassing. The old man on the divine tree brushed his long eyebrows. It was clear that his eyebrows were obstructing his vision. He moved closer to look at the item in Ning Shu's hand and asked with a hoarse voice, what is this? Ning Shu demonstrated and said, this is something that humans like, it can relieve mental stress. But smoking is harmful to health, it is usually a way to get closer. The old man nodded. You want to get closer to me? Wasn't the main point about the cigarette? Was it really a good idea to see the main point so quickly? The old man took the cigarette. Ning Shu was stunned, he did not think that the old man took it. She was just looking for something to start a conversation. She could only take out her lighter and light the cigarette for the old man. The old man took a few puffs and exhaled, shaking his head. It's not strong, it can't be compared to some things in the void. Ning Shu was speechless, there was such a thing in the void. This old man was actually an old smoker. And his spiritual body could also smoke. It was a little intoxicating. The old man's teeth had all fallen out, his mouth was dry and sunken, just like that, he finished the cigarette. Ning Shu tactfully handed over a pack of cigarettes and said, "Don't eat this kind of thing." The old man on the divine tree said, "When I was young, I encountered a type of plant. After that plant absorbed it, my entire body became light, and my strength was much stronger than this." Ning Shu's face turned green as he asked, "Is this thing addictive?" The old man from the divine tree said, "I don't know. Anyway, I've only seen it once." Ning Shu was a little worried. The void was really too dangerous, and there was also this kind of plant. This plant was clearly too similar to something. If Fatan were to run around outside, it would be very dangerous for him to encounter or eat it by mistake. This kind of thing would definitely damage the strength of the void creatures. Ning Shu asked, "How did your body react after you ate it?" "Yeah, I was in a deep sleep for who knows how long. When I woke up, I was already here." The old man from the divine tree had revealed quite a bit of information. He was brought to the sacred grounds by someone. Ning Shu stopped talking about this topic and said to the old man, "Senior, do you think I can stay in the cub house for a while?" The old man from the divine tree tilted his head and was at a loss for a moment before asking, "What did you say? I can't hear you." Ning Shu, this old man was definitely selectively deaf. Although he was far away, he could see that when Taishu and Sang Liang were talking to the old man from the divine tree, they didn't seem to be shouting themselves hoarse. Ning Shu shouted loudly, "Senior, I want to enter the cub house to study. Look, I have a wooden token here." Ning Shu took out the wooden token and handed it to the old man. The old man looked at it with his dim eyes. "Isn't this Fatan's thing?" "Yes, I have a very close relationship with Fatan. They went through life and death together." The old man from the divine tree couldn't hear clearly again and looked at Ning Shu blankly. His ears were really magical. He could hear when he wanted to hear, and he couldn't hear when he didn't want to. He really didn't know what to say. Ning Shu said loudly, "Senior, can I enter the cub house?" The old man from the divine tree was silent. Ning Shu stared at him. As long as the old man didn't say anything, Ning Shu wouldn't give up. The old man from the divine tree stared at Ning Shu. His dim eyes were exceptionally sharp. Ning Shu felt as if his body had been pierced through. He was naked. It was as if the old man knew all his secrets. Ning Shu coughed and got rid of the sharp piercing gaze. The old man's eyes became blank and unfocused. He withdrew his piercing gaze. Ning Shu looked at him and waited for an answer. The old man seemed to be thinking for a long time with his eyes closed. Ning Shu waited patiently. He actually started snoring, each snoring longer than the last. Ning Shu fell asleep. Ning Shu stretched out his hand and pushed the old man. What he touched was a jelly-like feeling. Wasn't this the nerves of the divine tree? His spiritual body actually had a physical body. Ning Shu shook him. "Senior, wake up. Wake up. It's cold. The rooster crows. The sun is out." The old man opened his eyes and yawned. He asked, "Oh right, where were you just now?" This is the disadvantage of being old. You don't have enough energy. You don't pay attention and fall asleep. Ning Shu, what can I do? I can only smile. Ning Shu said loudly, Senior, can I enter the cub house? I want to stay there for a while. The old man from the divine tree asked, Why do you want to enter the cub house? There are only young beasts there. These young beasts are very naughty. You won't like them. Ning Shu smiled and said, I want to bask in your glory. The old man from the divine tree said, Oh, you're here for the divine imprint, right? I won't accept you. What's wrong with you? Directly saying that you're here for my divine imprint makes me feel uncomfortable. Can't you say that I like young beasts? Or something else? The old man from the divine tree said unhappily. Ning Shu, I like young beasts. Ning Shu said tentatively. The old man from the divine tree nodded indifferently. Ning Shu didn't react for a moment. He nodded. Nodding meant that he agreed. Did he really agree? He agreed too quickly. Ning Shu was in disbelief. Ning Shu quickly followed the old man and asked, Senior, do you mean that I can enter the cub house? The old man said fiercely, How many times do you want me to say the same thing? Ning Shu's brows relaxed and revealed a bright smile. Thank you, Senior. I will definitely study hard. The old man from the divine tree's face fell. You didn't ask me to fulfill your wish because you like young beasts and want to take care of them. That's why I let you in. Ning Shu, he understood every word the old man said. But when they were put together, he was stunned for a long time. He didn't understand what the old man meant. I entered the cub house to take care of young beasts because I like young beasts. The old man glanced at Ning Shu. Isn't that the case? Ning Shu's words were stuck in his throat. Yes, that's the case. You're right. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 38-39. Although she didn't know how her studies had been twisted into taking care of the cubs, she had still entered the cubs' shelter. She wasn't even considered a cub anymore. It was like a deal. She could enter, but she had to take care of the cubs. This made Ning Shu feel more at ease. After all, she was a weak human. Ning Shu followed the tree of God into the barrier. It was a sealed courtyard. All the rooms were built around a huge tree in the middle. The tree was huge. Even a small protruding root was huge. The tree was so tall that the top couldn't be seen. There were all kinds of cubs of all shapes and sizes playing on the protruding roots. Their bodies were covered in grass and mud. Some were fighting with each other. Pull my tail, I scratch your face. On the fence, on the trees, on the ground, in the water, on the roof, there were lively cubs everywhere. Their constant chatter caused the entire cub house to not have a single moment of peace. When they saw the old man from the sacred tree, the cubs started to call him Grandpa in their childish voices. The old man nodded and brought Ning Shu to a large room. There was an empty stove in the room. This is your room. You will be responsible for cooking for these cubs, the old man said. Ning Shu was speechless. You must be kidding me, right? Right, no, right. She never thought that she would become a kitchen maid. And the kind with terrible cooking skills. Ning Shu maintained the smile on her face. There were so many cubs on the ground, hanging on the trees, and swimming in the water. There were countless of them. She had to make something for so many cubs. Ning Shu refused. She said, I have other work. I can't prepare 3 meals a day for these cubs. It was scary to be in the kitchen all day. There were mission takers waiting for her. The main system would ask her to pick up the star stone fragments. It was hard to deal with. The old man said, I'm not asking you to prepare every day. Prepare more, enough for them. Come back later. Ning Shu was speechless. The old man looked at Ning Shu unkindly. Then why did you come in? Ning Shu said directly, I want to bathe in your divine light. Fatan should have told you who I am, right? The tree in the middle of the courtyard is me. As long as you are in the nursery, you can bathe in my divine light. You can bathe in my divine light and take care of the cub. It's the best of both worlds. Why? Are you not willing? Ning Shu, he didn't know how to refute her. The old man from the divine tree asked from his soul, don't you like those cubs? Ning Shu's eyes narrowed as he looked at the lively scene outside through the door. He really couldn't go against his conscience and say that he liked it. Therefore, Ning Shu could only remain silent. Children were the hardest to deal with. If you're silent, then that means you're silent. Get some food for the child. The old man on the divine tree said. Ning Shu refused in his heart. His cooking skills had been certified by Fatan, and it was not delicious at all. Would these children eat dirt? Ning Shu saw a child stuffing mud into his mouth. Under Ning Shu's gaze, he actually swallowed the mud. She was suddenly full of confidence in her cooking skills. If he could even eat dirt, then what she cooked couldn't be worse than dirt, right? Ning Shu scanned the empty room. From the outside, these rooms didn't look big, but after entering the room, it became big, wide, and very tall. It gave people the feeling that a lot of things could be stuffed into the room. Ning Shu asked, where are the ingredients? Where are the things? Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. Without ingredients, where could she conjure food from? The old man on the divine tree said, go outside and catch them. You, go, outside, to, catch, ah. Ning Shu's eyes widened. What did that mean? Not only did she have to cook, she also had to be responsible for finding the ingredients. Ning Shu couldn't maintain her smile anymore. Senior, with my strength, I'm afraid I won't be able to return from hunting. The old man on the divine tree looked at Ning Shu accusingly. Don't you love these cubs? Did it go from liking to loving? This love was really too heavy. Ning Shu, if I'm not here, how can I love these cubs? The old man on the divine tree said carelessly, it's okay. I won't let you find those top-grade ingredients. They're just ordinary creatures. These creatures are usually large in numbers and have low intelligence. They're enough to eat. Ning Shu, while hunting, if you can pick some fruits, some meat is greasy. Ning Shu looked up to the sky and roared in her heart. She had become a cook. In exchange, she could stay at the cub's shelter. Just do it. The old man on the divine tree stroked his beard that almost reached the ground. The cubs like the jerky you prepared for Fatan. How about this, prepare a bird meat for each of them. That bird was bigger than a plane. Prepare one for each cub. Ning Shu smiled and asked, may I ask, can you finish eating so much? Of course. Didn't you say that you can't stay here forever? Prepare more so that the cubs have something to eat. Ning Shu's mouth was already stiff. May I ask again, what do these children eat? Without her, could it be that these children didn't eat? Oh, they eat crystals. They're a few grades lower in energy. It's enough to feed these children. Ning Shu suddenly wanted to give herself a big slap. Why did she ask this? If there were no crystals, would she have to collect them herself in the future? Ning Shu's ears were filled with playful voices. The cub's various voices were like magic in her ears. She didn't feel good. She could imagine Fatan's face in this situation. He must be cold and lifeless. Ning Shu felt that she still needed some time to adapt. With a stiff smile, Ning Shu asked, Senior, may I know the original intention of this cub's establishment? Was it to protect the cubs of the void and let them grow up happily? Ning Shu had seen when a race was born, there were actually other races eyeing them covetously and eating them. They stole the pure energy of these newly born races. Some of the cubs that could escape would naturally allow this race to continue. What she saw was a very naked natural law. This holy land seemed to be a peach blossom spring hidden in the void. The old man on the divine tree's eyes became very blank. I don't know. Anyway, I woke up here and have been staying here all this time. Anyway, you just need to know that these cubs are very cute. Ning Shu was speechless. Savage, okay. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3840. Actually, the old man had made it very clear. If you want to comprehend the divine pattern, you can, but the condition is that you have to take care of these cubs. You have to take good care of them. If you accept, you can stay. If you don't, you can leave. Ning Shu walked around the empty room twice and decided to agree. After all, this was an opportunity. Logically speaking, the old man could completely ignore him and give him such a condition. There was nothing to lose. It all depended on whether he felt it was worth it or not. Ning Shu nodded and said, I'm willing to take care of these cubs. The old man from the divine tree revealed a smile, his face full of wrinkles. I knew you were someone who liked children. Ning Shu denied it in his heart. I'm not. I don't like cubs. If possible, Ning Shu wanted to say, Senior, I actually like you. Ning Shu said, then, Senior, we're on the same side now, right? I have something to ask. The old man stroked his beard calmly. Young man, be more straightforward. Ask whatever you want. Ning Shu thought about it. This was not a suitable question for a colleague he had just met. He said, I suddenly forgot what I wanted to say. She wanted to ask, Senior, have you never thought of leaving the sacred land? Obviously, it was not suitable. She did not ask. You're so young, but your memory is so bad. What are you waiting for? Go and prepare food. The old man slammed his walking stick on the ground and said. Ning Shu, do I have to prepare it alone? Ning Shu asked. What else can you do? The old people here are old, and the young ones are young. Do you want these cubs to go out and prepare food for you? The void is so big. Can you find them? I'm so old, and you want me to prepare food? You're just watching from the side. Ah. The old man slammed his walking stick on the ground. It looked like he was about to smash Ning Shu with it. Ning Shu ran away from the sacred ground. The next step was to look for birds, one chick and one chick. Ning Shu did not intend to do so much. If he did too much at once, he would give too much. If his appetite grew bigger, he would not be able to satisfy it. Take your time. Ning Shu touched the nest of the giant birds and looked at the birds flying around above his head. It was like an airplane flying above his head, making cawing sounds like crows. Ning Shu pursed his lips. Was he going to deal with these birds alone? In the past, at least he had Fa Tian and Little Mouse. Now that he was alone, Ning Shu felt a little guilty. In order not to startle these birds, Ning Shu moved stealthily, not making a single sound. He even used the law of water to conceal himself, concealing his aura. Lest the birds smell a strange odor and run away. Slowly, many vines extended from his hand, stealthily. Some birds were alert and stared at the rattling vines. The rattling vines immediately stopped climbing. When the birds were not paying attention, the rattling vines continued to spread towards the birds in the tree. These rattling vines were more deceptive. Even if the birds noticed, they would only be suspicious. After all, the rattling vines on the tree did not pay attention to whether they were there normally or not. The rattling vines continued to spread. Ning Shu was careful and held his breath. A rattling vine quickly wrapped around a giant bird. The giant bird was startled. It spread its wings and broke free from the binding of the rattling vines. It felt like the binding of the rattling vines had no power at all. It was as if spider silk had wrapped around the giant bird's body. The giant bird gently moved, not even using much strength. It spread its wings and broke free from the rattling vines. The sudden action of the giant bird startled the other birds. They all flapped their wings and flew up without caring about anything. They flew up and cried loudly. The entire flock of birds became lively. The other rattling vines immediately stopped moving. They wrapped around the tree like ordinary rattling vines, waiting for an opportunity. Obviously, these rattling vines were not considered as power to the void creatures. Rattling vines might not work. In the past, when Fation was here, he could directly use Fation to firmly bind the birds. They were not of the same level of power. Ning Shu twined the vines one by one. Although the strength of a single vine was relatively weak, it wasn't easy to break free from the entanglement. It was a little sad. She could not even defeat the lower level of the void's food chain. She could not even touch a chicken. Normal birds would not have to go through so much trouble. After a while, the birds let down their guard and returned to the giant tree. Only the bird that was caught before kept looking around. When it saw the rattling vines on the tree, it even used its beak to peck at the rattling vines. The rattling vines remained motionless, allowing the bird to peck at them. The giant bird pecked for a while. It looked like the rattling vines did not attack it. However, the situation before made the giant bird feel a little lost. Obviously, with the giant bird's intelligence, it was not enough to think about such a situation. Moreover, its companions were by its side, so it felt very safe. Therefore, the giant bird was completely relieved. Ning Shu secretly wrapped the rattling vines to form bigger rattling vines, waiting for the right time. Ning Shu kept making more rattling vines. 10 was not a small number, but 10 was not a small number either. Every time he made 1 or 2 for the Fation, there was still so much meat. In an instant, all the vines launched an attack. The thick vines instantly wrapped around the giant bird like chains from all directions. All the birds were shocked. Some of the ones that were not controlled flapped their wings and flew away. The giant birds that were bound by the rattling vines struggled desperately. How should he deal with these giant birds? He could not let them keep flapping their wings like this. With so much strength, Ning Shu felt that he could not control these birds for a long time. They struggled desperately, but he could not hold them back. No matter what kind of creature it was, the brain was a very important part. Ning Shu took out his weapon and chopped off the giant bird's head. Large amounts of blood spurted out. The headless giant bird twitched for a while and stopped moving. Ning Shu plucked the feathers of these giant birds and dealt with their innards. They were all stored in the meson space. Other than that, Ning Shu went to the restaurant in Water City to get some seasoning like oil, salt, and spices. Actually, the meat of these birds was a little fishy. If it was boiled, it would definitely not taste good. He only knew how to make jerky, so he made some slightly spicy jerky. Ning Shu dragged the bags of spices away. Next, he had to pick some fruits. There were fruits after meals. He was really a school cafeteria auntie. What fruit should he look for? Ning Shu felt that it was not easy to find fruits. Some races like to eat a certain kind of fruit, so they would camp around a fruit tree for a long time. Picking fruits by himself was tantamount to snatching food from the tiger's mouth. There were many people who liked delicious fruits. Ning Shu naturally would not challenge the void races alone. The fruits he found were more common, fruits that were not guarded by living creatures. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3841. He picked a lot of fruits and spent a lot of time. Then, he followed the wooden sign to find the sacred land and return. Before entering the sacred land, Dan Qing informed Ning Shu, the organization wants you to go home. Ning Shu, speak human language. Dan Qing, oh, you haven't done any missions or dealt with other things, so the organization wants you to go back and deal with the fragments. Ning Shu was a bit hesitant. Forget it, he should go to the Cubs first. It wouldn't be good to miss the first appointment. When he was done here, he would go back to do missions. In the past, it was 2 points and 1 line, but now it was 1 point and countless lines. When he went to the sacred land, he had to find something to eat in the void and come back to feed the Cubs. Ning Shu quickened his pace and rushed to the Cubs. He passed through the barrier and entered. A burst of noise entered his ears. It was so lively all the time. Under the tree, Fa Tian was talking to the old man. Ning Shu walked over. Fa Tian turned his head. When he saw Ning Shu, he was stunned. After a while, he asked, "How did you get here? How did he get in?" Ning Shu said, "I'm here to see you." The old man said, "This is the new cook. She's in charge of cooking for you." He turned his head and looked at Ning Shu with a serious expression. "What happened? Why did you come back so late?" Ning Shu, "It takes time to collect the ingredients. The ingredients didn't fall in front of me. Damn, this old man's temper is so bad. Doesn't it take time?" Fa Tian's expression was a bit complicated. Cook. Ning Shu of course knew what Fa Tian meant. "I know how to make jerky. I'll make jerky." Fa Tian had lost confidence in her. "Then I'll go cook." Fa Tian, come with me. I have something to ask you. Ning Shu went into the kitchen and took out a knife to cut the meat. He said to Fa Tian, who was standing at the door, "Come in. Am I embarrassing you here?" His companion was a cafeteria auntie, which made Fa Tian lose face in front of the other Cubs. Ning Shu took out the desserts she had brought back from the hotel. She realized that Fa Tian was actually a sweet tooth. Fa Tian rolled his eyes and walked in. He took the dessert from Ning Shu's hands and scooped it into his mouth as he said, "What's there to be embarrassed about? I just didn't expect you to have the confidence to be a cook. Don't you know what you're doing? I just want to be a cub and play with these happy cubs, but unfortunately, reality is not like this." Ning Shu sighed. "I thought I was going back to my childhood. What can I do?" Fa Tian finished the dessert in a few mouthfuls. He choked and rolled his eyes. He stuck out his tongue and licked the residue from the corner of his mouth clean. Ning Shu stared at him. "Slow down. I'm not fighting with you." Fa Tian hammered his chest. He probably finally swallowed the dessert that was choking in his throat. "Why isn't anyone fighting with me? Soon, someone will smell it." Fa Tian said as he took the razor and helped Ning Shu to cut the meat. Soon, there was chatter at the door, mixed with messy footsteps. Obviously, there was more than one person. Ning Shu glanced at Fa Tian. Fa Tian was expressionless. He looked carefully and even frowned. The first to enter was a little girl with fish scale-like patterns on her face. Her whole body was green and she looked like a fish that had turned into a spirit. As soon as she came in, she sniffed her nose. "Fa Tian, what are you eating?" There were also some strange-looking cubs behind her. They stared at Fa Tian with wet and longing eyes. They gave people the feeling that they would drool and explode. Fa Tian said expressionlessly, "No, you're wrong." The girl looked at the blood and meat on the ground and said happily, "There's meat today. There's meat." She stretched out her claw-like hands with green claws and sharp nails. She grabbed the raw meat and stuffed it into her mouth. Seeing this, the cubs behind her also rushed up and grabbed the meat and stuffed it into their mouths. More and more cubs gathered outside the kitchen. Fa Tian grabbed the meat in their hands with a sullen face and said coldly, "What are you doing?" It's not ready yet. Eat it when it's ready. The girl asked, is it the kind you usually eat? Yes. Other than this, Ning Shu couldn't do anything else. This meat could be eaten because it was simple. Secondly, it was mixed with various seasonings, so the taste couldn't be too bad. Of course, the right seasonings were needed. If all the seasonings were mixed in, it would definitely be inedible. Mushroom Scale smiled, revealing sharp, fish-like teeth. Ning Shu felt that this mushroom was a fish spirit. Geishan looked at the cubs blocking the entrance and said, who's blocking the entrance? You won't get to eat later. When the cubs heard this, they immediately scattered like a swarm of bees. Fa Tian closed the door to prevent more cubs from running in. Ning Shu said with a smile, these cubs are quite afraid of you. No, they're afraid that they won't have food. Fa Tian wouldn't admit that everyone in the cub house was afraid of him. While processing the meat, Ning Shu asked, why did you leave the cub house? The void is dangerous. Fa Tian said, nothing. I just went out for a walk. Ning Shu was speechless. It was fine if he didn't want to talk about it. Ning Shu stopped asking and began to cook the meat. Seeing the boiling water and the blood in the meat boiling, Ning Shu felt that he was really a qualified cafeteria lady. He had made a lot of jerky and was already very familiar with it. Seeing that Ning Shu really stopped asking, Fa Tian couldn't help but ask, are you really not curious at all? I'm curious, but if you don't want to talk about it, I won't ask. Fa Tian said, if you're curious, you should tell me. How would I know if you don't tell me? I thought you were just asking. I'm worried that you might be in danger outside, said Ning Shu. Fa Tian said, actually, I'm going out to look for something. Ning Shu asked, what? Fa Tian said, to look for the remains of some species. Ning Shu was speechless. You're really collecting ashes. The process of making jerky wasn't complicated, but there were too many of them, so it was a bit tiring. Outside the kitchen, on the roof, on the windows, there were cubs everywhere, staring at the kitchen covetously. Ning Shu felt that these cubs weren't waiting for food, but wanted to eat her. In the face of so many green eyes, the pressure was a bit too much. After the jerky was done, the old man of the divine tree slowly appeared and said, children, I'll give you an extra meal today. Jerky and fruit. The cubs immediately cheered and jumped, jumping and somersaulting. They clapped and cheered, shouting Grandpa, Grandpa. It was as if there were countless Calabash brothers. Ning Shu was speechless. Damn, this old man is good at seizing the moment. I'm the one who went to look for the stuff. I'm the one who made the jerky. I'm the one who washed the fruit. To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3842. Line up one by one and get it. Old man Shinshu said confidently. The Calabash brothers lined up obediently and stood in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu gave each of them a bag of dried meat and a portion of fruits. Fa Tian helped to distribute the food. Luckily, it was enough at the end. Ning Shu, Fa Tian, and old man Shinshu naturally wouldn't eat it. The cubs who received the food started to eat while sitting or standing. Because it was slightly spicy, some of them couldn't get used to it. Spiciness wasn't actually a taste. It was the pain caused by the burning of the chili in the mouth. However, this pain made people feel happy. Therefore, the more they ate, the more they couldn't stop eating. They ate while drinking water. Some cubs couldn't bear to eat it, so they ate it bit by bit. Some cubs stuffed it into their mouths like hungry ghosts. Old man Shinshu looked at the cubs eating and said to Ning Shu, make more next time. Look, the kids can't bear to eat it. Ning Shu laughed. This old man was really bad. After the cubs finished eating, Ning Shu still had to clean up the fruit peels and other rubbish on the ground. He was the cleaner and cafeteria auntie. After tidying up, Ning Shu let out a long sigh. It was tiring. Probably because eating could really bring people closer to each other, the cubs gathered around Ning Shu one after another. They chattered and asked Ning Shu what they wanted to eat next, saying that the dried meat was delicious. There were also some who said that they didn't like this flavor. There weren't any sweet ones, but some insisted that the salty ones were delicious. Then, the battle between the sweet and the salty ones began. Ning Shu smiled and said, "Next time, we'll eat dried meat. Dried meat is the most delicious thing." He didn't want to waste time making other dishes. Usually, exquisite dishes were rare but good. With so many cubs, he couldn't make any. He could only make a big pot of rice. It was already good enough to have a big pot of rice. Ning Shu felt that since he had produced dried meat, he should learn how to stir-fry vegetables. Making some rice was also not bad. It's not good to eat jerky all the time. Fatan listened to Ning Shu say that jerky was the best. He was silent and didn't expose her. The fish spirit Gulong tilted her head and looked at Ning Shu. "Are you very close to Fatan?" Ning Shu nodded. "Yeah, we're partners." The fish spirit mushroom nodded. "That's good. I can eat a lot of things if I follow you. I like jerky very much." "Ning Shu, as long as you like it." As he spoke, Ning Shu was still not used to the appearance of void creatures even though he was used to the appearance of humans. Mushroom Cool's face was covered in fish scales, but they weren't real fish scales. There were patterns on his skin, and his body was covered in water vapor. He was probably an aquatic creature. It was obvious that Mushroom Cool had a good relationship with Fatan. All of Fatan's friends in Cub Club were also close. He communicated more with the creatures in the void. Mushroom Cool's expression was a little hesitant. It was obvious that there was something that she couldn't say. Ning Shu wouldn't take the initiative to ask. Mushroom Cool couldn't help but say to Ning Shu, "My name is Donglan. I live in Donglan Sea." She was indeed an aquatic creature. Ning Shu, "Hello, Donglan. Was her jerky really that delicious? Was she trying to curry favor with her?" Ning Shu puffed up his chest and raised his head, waiting for the little girl to flatter him. Fatan walked over and said to Donglan, "Don't say any more. If you continue, I won't be polite to you." Scram. Ning Shu. They seemed to have a good relationship. What was going on? Fatan's words were quite rude. He directly told her to scram. Ning Shu didn't scold Fatan for being unfriendly to her classmates. After all, Fatan wasn't a real child. He had his own thoughts and wisdom. Ning Shu didn't see Fatan as a child anymore. Donglan pursed her lips. There was a hint of pity in her eyes. She turned to Ning Shu and said, "Look at Fatan. Why is she so fierce? Can't she talk nicely?" Ning Shu, hee. Other than that, he didn't know how to react. Even ghosts didn't know what they were talking about. Donglan reached out her claws and grabbed Ning Shu's hand. She shook it twice and said, "Talk to Fatan." Ning Shu felt like his hand was being grabbed by a robot. It was very stiff and the other party was very strong. She was just a little girl, but she was already so strong. Ning Shu tried to break free but failed, so she gave up. She didn't want to break her arm. She said, "Donglan, I don't know what you're talking about. Let's talk about it after you've made things clear." Donglan immediately explained the whole sequence of events to him. The reason for this was because of Fatan's slightly perverted hobby, which was to collect the ashes of void creatures after they died. Fatan liked to run outside when he had nothing to do. This little girl always saw Fatan running outside and felt that it was interesting. She insisted that Fatan bring her along. Fatan thought that this little girl was a void creature after all. She could help him collect ashes, so he brought her along. Fa Tian liked to fight whenever he had nothing to do. When one side was defeated, if they weren't eaten by the winner, the corpse would slowly turn to dust. Dong Lan was a little girl. The cub's environment was one of unity and friendship. It wasn't as cruel as the void. When the little girl saw this kind of scene, she was first afraid. Secondly, she felt a little sympathy for the side that was beaten up badly and was about to be eaten. Sometimes, she would even make some noise and disturb the two sides fighting. She would even be chased. Fa Tian was considered a strong person in the cub's place. According to Dong Lan, none of the cub's cub could beat Fa Tian. In some situations, the little girl would say, Fa Tian, they're so pitiful. You should go and help them. At that time, Fa Tian told her to get lost and never brought Dong Lan out again. Ning Shu was speechless. He didn't know why, but looking at Dong Lan, Ning Shu wanted to laugh. He held back his laughter and asked, then what do you want me to persuade Fa Tian? Persuade him not to collect the ashes, or persuade him to go and help? This. The little girl was a little confused. She suddenly didn't know what to say. Ning Shu said, Fa Tian has his own ideas. I can't persuade him. Even you can't persuade him? Dong Lan said anxiously. Ning Shu was a little helpless. What do you want me to persuade him about? That's right, Fa Tian. Don't you think that Fa Tian is a little cold? He watched coldly as others fought to the death and ran over to collect the ashes without any psychological burden. Ning Shu was speechless. Although void creatures fight and even eat each other, it's fine if you don't see it. But when you see it, you're indifferent. Ning Shu gave the little girl a thumbs up. You're a good child. You're right, but why don't you go and help? Chapter 38-43. You persuaded Fa Tian, but you didn't go yourself. Why did you let Fa Tian go? Ning Shu asked with a smile. The little girl was stunned for a moment. Because Fa Tian is very powerful. If Fa Tian makes a move, I will definitely make a move with him. Fa Tian rolled his eyes. Whether I go or not is my own business. I will just watch from the side. So what if I am very cold? I made them fight. I instigated them to fight. Since you are so kind, why don't you go yourself? The little girl showed her sharp teeth and looked very fierce. She angrily shouted at Fa Tian, you know what I mean. Why do you have to twist my words? Ning Shu wanted to laugh as he watched from the side. In fact, intelligent creatures, even void creatures, had similar personalities to humans. With intelligence, they would think more, and the more they thought, the more they would have emotions. This little girl was a vivid example of two words, Saint Mary and Virgin Mary. Saint Mary, they are so pitiful. I want to help them. Virgin Mary, they are so pitiful. Go help them. However, using Virgin Mary to describe Dong Lan was a bit too much. Probably in the child's heart, Fa Tian was very powerful. He was like a hero who bravely stood up at this time. Whether it was an adult or a child, self-protection and self-preservation were instinctive. This little girl had been with Fa Tian for a while. She kept nagging at Fa Tian, but she did not make a move. Clearly, she knew that there were some things that she could not show off. Ning Shu said, I can't say for sure. I can only say that your way of thinking is different. You are not wrong, and neither is Fa Tian. I won't persuade Fa Tian because I don't want Fa Tian to be in a dangerous situation. In that situation, I will be selfish and cold because I want to live. Dong Lan's face twitched a few times. She spread her hands and said, okay, I found the wrong person. Ning Shu nodded. Yes, you found the wrong person. Dong Lan looked at Fadian. Fadian rolled his eyes and looked away. He did not even want to look at her. Dong Lan naturally wouldn't ask for a snub and insist on talking to Fa Tian. She turned around to talk and play with the other cubs. Ning Shu nudged Fa Tian with his elbow. She is very disappointed in you. That girl didn't want to see a boy acting like a hero, and Fa Tian's actions weren't heroic at all. Fa Tian, Whether he was disappointed or not was none of his business. The old man walked over and said to Ning Shu, "Do you want to comprehend the divine runes?" Ning Shu nodded repeatedly. "Yes, yes." The old man said, "Go under the tree." Fa Tian said to Ning Shu, "I'll go with you, in case you don't understand the situation." Ning Shu obeyed and went under the tree. He looked at the tree up close. The tree was densely packed and twisted, crisscrossing. After looking at it for a long time, his eyes were dazzled, and everything was white. Ning Shu hurriedly closed his eyes, in case he received too much and his soul exploded. Ning Shu opened his eyes again and found himself in a snowy white space. Fa Tian was standing next to him. "Where is this?" Ning Shu asked Fa Tian. "This is the old man's spiritual world. Look carefully, it's faster to comprehend the divine runes here than on your own. You can also comprehend the most fundamental power," Fa Tian said to Ning Shu. "Pay attention, it's coming soon," Fa Tian reminded Ning Shu. Ning Shu immediately focused and looked carefully at this spiritual world. Soon, golden lines flashed past one after another. These lines were of different shapes. They flashed and disappeared before Ning Shu could see them clearly. Ning Shu rubbed his eyes. He felt like he was going blind. His head was full of lines. The more he looked, the messier it became. Ning Shu looked at these lines expressionlessly. They were getting faster and faster, and he couldn't see a single one clearly. Fa Tian reminded Ning Shu, "Go and grasp these lines. If you want to grasp these lines, you have to know where they are going. Take it slow, don't rush, don't be greedy. Keep your eyes on them and don't look at anything else. The other divine runes are just distractions. Don't look with your eyes, look with your mind." Ning Shu listened to Fa Tian's reminder. He closed his eyes and used his mind to explore. He found that the entire space was filled with lines. They were densely packed and twisted. In short, they blended and separated from each other. It was like the game Gluttonous Snake. Fa Tian beside him also began to comprehend. Clearly, the more lines he grasped, the more divine runes he would be able to comprehend. There were only too many divine runes, not too many. As someone who had entered this place for the first time, Ning Shu didn't expect to be able to grasp a single line. He wanted to familiarize himself with the environment and see the characteristics of these divine runes. Fa Tian beside him reached out and grabbed a line. This line struggled in Fa Tian's hand, trying to escape from Fa Tian. Fa Tian clenched his fingers, but the divine rune still slipped away from Fa Tian's hand. Fa Tian wasn't disappointed. He continued to grasp other lines. Ning Shu reached out, wanting to grasp the divine runes. However, Ning Shu couldn't even touch the divine runes in front of him. It was very strange. First, you have to know where the lines are going. Only then can you grasp them. You won't be able to grasp them randomly. If you want to track someone, you have to at least know where that person is going. Only then can you catch them and intercept them. Ning Shu made an "oh" sound and calmed down. He only focused on one line. He stared at the line with all his attention, looking at the traces of the twisting lines. After observing for a long time, he reached out to grasp the line. However, he still couldn't grasp it. Ning Shu wasn't annoyed. If this thing was so easy to comprehend, then it wouldn't be so powerful. Ning Shu wasn't a talented person, so he wasn't in a hurry. Fa Tian at the side felt like he was sitting on a rocket. Ning Shu was competing with one line. While they were still fighting a battle of wits and courage, the old man's voice rang out, "Time's up. Come out." His vision blurred. Ning Shu opened his eyes and found himself standing under a big tree. Ning Shu, so fast. He couldn't even feel the lines, let alone grab them. He couldn't even touch them. Fast? Isn't this exhausting my mental energy? I'm already so old. Using a bit of mental energy will tire me out. Young people don't know how to comprehend. The old man said unhappily. Ning Shu, yes, you're right. I won't argue with you. Ning Shu asked Fa Tian, are you going back? I have to go back to work. I'm not going back. We've already met. Ning Shu reminded Fa Tian to be careful when he was collecting the ashes outside. He mustn't act rashly. If he encountered a powerful one and got killed, who could he reason with? His life was his, and he would be the one to feel the pain. Some people's words didn't even hurt. It was fine to listen to them, but don't take them seriously. Don't use your own life to prove other people's stupidity. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3844. Ning Shu was afraid that Fa Tian wouldn't be able to resist the temptation of beauty at such a young age. After all, when it came to love, if one was too rational, their genes wouldn't be able to be passed down. There would always be times when they would become muddle-headed. Although he didn't know what Fa Tian's taste was like, Ning Shu felt that the girl didn't match her taste. She had a lively personality. She seemed to be more eloquent than the other cubs. Fa Tian listened to Ning Shu's advice and nodded. Don't worry. She has nothing to do with me. I won't do anything I don't want to do because of a few words from her. Now, he couldn't be bothered with Donglan. In the past, he saw that there were many treasures in the Donglan Sea. The area was bigger and the water quality was special. If one wasn't from the Donglan Sea, they wouldn't be able to sink into the water. He thought that if he went to the Donglan Sea to find something in the future, he would have an acquaintance who could help him find it. However, when he interacted with Donglan, he realized that Donglan was just a mushroom that was doted on by the elders in the family. Some things were very natural. Fa Tian felt that although he didn't suffer much, being by Ning Shu's side made him empathize with her. He felt a little pitiful. Now, he had given up on interacting with Donglan. Ning Shu saw that Fa Tian's expression was serious and didn't seem to be perfunctory. He was relieved. Then I'll go back. You stay in the cub house and play with people you like. Fa Tian nodded. He stared at Ning Shu's ear and asked, what is this thing? He could vaguely feel a little life force. It was a little like an ultimate martial art, but an ultimate martial art wasn't so small. Ning Shu touched the earring and said with a smile, I forgot to tell you. It's an ultimate martial art that becomes so small after being tempered. I was so worried that it would fall off. Fa Tian looked at the earring for a while. It's a good thing. If you keep it well, it shouldn't fall off. If you're worried, you can bind it to your soul. The ultimate martial art is you. You are the ultimate martial art. Ning Shu. Am I going to become a book? Ning Shu raised his doubts. That's not too good. After all, this peerless martial art is about to form a world of life. If it's bound, I'll become this driver's heavenly Tao. If the world collapses too quickly, I will die too. In the future, if her peerless martial arts were to be destroyed, she would only lose half of her soul. She could not put all her eggs in one basket. Fa Tian thought that it was normal for her to have some misgivings since he had not yet succeeded in obtaining the ultimate martial art. Normally, mission enforcers would not easily bind themselves to the world of the living. If the soul was not fatally injured, the soul could exist for a long time. But if it was bound to the world, it would have the same fate as the world. Then let's wait a little longer. However, you must take good care of this thing. Don't lose it. Be careful. Fa Tian instructed Ning Shu. Don't give it to anyone. It contains half of your soul. I know. Don't worry. Fa Tian had said it many times. Let's not talk about how long this thing had been with her and had special feelings. Also, this world seemed to be able to provide her with some power. If it wasn't for the power provided by the peerless martial art, she would have been eaten by the grand uncle. No matter who it was, it would have been eaten by him. She felt that Fa Tian valued the peerless martial art very much. She asked, "You value it very much?" "It's okay. After all, it's a world of faith. It's different from an ordinary world. If you preserve it well, you'll have more power." Ning Shu nodded. "You're right." Fa Tian was thinking for her and the two of them. "I'll bring you desserts next time." After Ning Shu finished speaking, he left the Holy Land and returned to the system space. He was called to deal with the Star Stone. Tan Lang's eyes turned green when he saw Ning Shu. Ning Shu walked over. Ning Shu said directly, "I can't leave the organization." Tan Lang was silent for a moment and said, "Congratulations. You've learned how to answer first." Ning Shu said, "You're welcome." Tan Lang wanted to say something, but Ning Shu said again, "I can't leave the organization." Tan Lang took a deep breath and opened his mouth. Ning Shu interrupted him again. "The organization is stupid. Why would they let me leave?" Tan Lang took a deep breath. Ning Shu continued, "Don't say it. This is a misunderstanding. It's a rumor. Rumors stop with a wise man. You're a wise man. You should stop the rumor." Tan Lang's face turned ugly. "Can you let me say something?" Ning Shu looked at him as if he was listening. "Say it. Anyway, it's fake." Tan Lang had no desire to chat at all. He turned and left. When he turned, he rolled his eyes. Obviously, he didn't want to see Ning Shu. Ning Shu now had time to do things. Otherwise, people would come over and ask her if she didn't want to do things. Ning Shu processed the star stones very quickly. She wanted to finish the mission and then go to the Holy Land to comprehend the sacred pattern. The person who came to take over was Tai Shu. His face was a little pale. In fact, his skin had always been white, but now it was mixed with a gray color. It was the feeling of having no blood. Ning Shu touched her face. Her entire head had been bitten off. Her heart was suddenly filled with hope because she had a chance to kill Tai Shu. Let's see who would die first. Now that she saw Tai Shu, her heart was calm. There was no fear like before. As for his situation, she wasn't interested and didn't care. Ning Shu handed the item to Tai Shu. Half of Tai Shu's face was rotten, but now it seemed to have recovered. There wasn't even a trace. Tai Shu took the item and looked coldly at Ning Shu's head. He asked, "Is your head okay?" Ning Shu grinned and said calmly, "It's okay. Thank you for your concern." Then she turned and left. It wasn't that she wasn't interested in chatting with Tai Shu. There was nothing to chat about. It was time to do the mission. Ning Shu returned to the system space and said to Dan Qing, "Let's do the mission." Now, he could do fewer missions. The number of missions was reduced by 20%. Although it was less, he still had to do it. As long as he was a mission taker, he had to do missions for a day. Dan Qing agreed. Ning Shu exchanged some necessities for survival and directly entered the world. After a moment of dizziness, Ning Shu entered a body. Ning Shu opened her eyes and found that she was sleeping on a table in a bookstore. Not far away, a man was reading. Seeing that Ning Shu had woken up, he said to Ning Shu, "Go back and sleep. It's easy to catch a cold if you sleep here." Ning Shu didn't say anything. She continued to lie down and began to accept the plot. This plot was relatively simple. It was a book in this library that had been circulating for a long time. It was actually a little monster sealed by an exorcist. It was a spider demon, a little spider demon. It wore clothes but had splayed feet. When the bookshelf collapsed, the client unconsciously let go of the book and released the little spider demon inside. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3845. This little spider demon looked like a child and was ignorant. The exorcist had been merciful and left her behind. It had been some time since then. At that time, the country was a little chaotic, and it was easy for demons and ghosts to appear. There was a place where there was a big spider demon. The spider demon absorbed the essence of men by confusing them. Men often appeared in the village. Generally speaking, men were more easily confused and absorbed the essence of men. What was the point of confusing women? The villagers were afraid and couldn't do anything to the spider demon, so they hired a more famous exorcist. Spiders were more prolific. During fights, many small spiders would be born to help fight. When the big spider was suppressed by the exorcist, its corpse was suppressed in a temple. After the mother was suppressed, the little spider hatched from the spider egg. It was ignorant and stumbled to the ground. It was surrounded by angry villagers who raised their hoes and sickles to kill the little spider. It was scared and helpless. It cried and covered its face with its spider legs, as if it could avoid the fate of being beaten to death by the villagers. The exorcist saw that the little spider was harmless and stopped the angry villagers, saying that the heavens were virtuous. But the villagers didn't agree, saying that it was a demon that harmed people. The exorcist said that he would watch over it and be responsible for it. So the exorcist brought the little spider home and taught it, fed it, read and write, hoping that he could understand the little spider and not let it harm people. But spiders were spiders. The exorcist found that the little spider was unconsciously or deliberately confusing men and instinctively absorbing their essence. Seeing this, the exorcist thought that perhaps he was also confused by the little spider and didn't kill it. Instead, he used his own ID and life to seal the little spider. Now, the book was in this bookstore. After the spider was released, the client saw the introduction in the book, which explained the little spider's origin clearly. It had the ability to confuse people, especially men. When the client saw this, he told the young shop owner to continue sealing the little spider, or the consequences would be serious. Especially since the shop owner was a man, he was too easily confused. Moreover, the client had a good impression of the shop owner, and the two were friends who had known each other for many years. But the shop owner didn't seem to have such feelings for the client. Perhaps it was not the right time, but the two of them were still very good friends. The shopkeeper saw that Spider was just a child, and he liked the child's face. He thought that Spider had been sealed and was probably just a skeleton by now. Without the command of the big spider, the small spiders would definitely not do anything evil. He still insisted on adopting this child. If this child did not look strange, had 8 spider legs, and wore rather complicated clothes, it would not be the simple clothes of today. When she walked, she crawled on the ground, but she had the face of a lowly girl. The client felt that the little spider should be sealed, but the shop owner disagreed and brought the little spider home. Because of this, the two of them became quite unhappy. Moreover, the client often found that her friend seemed to be a little bewitched by the little spiders. Sometimes, her friend's expression was very confused, and her face would blush as if she was intoxicated. Usually, at this time, the client would wake him up and tell him that he had been bewitched by a spider and quickly sealed the small spider. He did not know if there were still exorcists around. The shop owner didn't mind and insisted that he wasn't bewitched. He hinted that the situation was getting worse and that the client was dying of anxiety. After all, it was someone he liked. Perhaps he was really annoyed by the client, so the shop owner brought the client to find a person who was very proficient in ancient Chinese. He ran an antique shop. The old man told them that if they were bewitched by the spider demon, they would only become a puppet that was controlled. After hearing the old man's words, the shop owner thought that they could put the little spider back, but the exorcist was dead and there was no way to seal it. The old man took out a scroll and said that there might be a clue that they wanted. After that, the old man specifically instructed the client to take good care of the shop owner and to wake him up at all times. Thus, the two of them and the little spider demon went to the place on the scroll. This was a relatively remote area, and no one lived there. When they passed by the temple, the little spider was very excited because her mother was sealed and suppressed inside. The two of them quickly followed. The whole temple was covered with many invisible spider webs. The client was stunned, but the little spider and the shop owner had already disappeared. The client quickly followed and found that he had been bewitched by the spider and walked straight to the deep pool behind the temple. The big spider demon was suppressed in the deep pool at the back of the mountain. The shop owner's body was wrapped in a lot of spider webs. The client quickly removed the spider webs on him. Without the spider webs, the shop owner wouldn't become a puppet that was controlled. However, he was pulled into the deep pool by the giant spider's feet. The two of them were about to fall into the deep pool when the little spider webs caught them. The little spider pointed at the beautiful spider that was President Hu and called for its mother. The little spider broke the spider webs on the client's side, causing him to fall into the deep pool. The spider mother ate the client's soul, while the little spider took over the client's body and lived with the humans. The old man was also a captive monster, or he was also bewitched by monsters. Perhaps this treasure hunt was actually a trap set up by the shop owner and the old man. So, was the shop owner bewitched or pretending to be bewitched? Or maybe he sacrificed his friend for his strange hobby, and it was a friend that saved him from danger time and time again. Ning Shu asked, if your soul wasn't eaten, how did you counterattack? There's resentment. This mission is completed, so the client can't come back. The soul power you obtained is actually from the organization. Dan Qin was probably a bit self-deprecating. He explained everything clearly to Ning Shu. Ning Shu, I'm a fake body now. You can say that. Ning Shu, ha 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 ha, suddenly, he couldn't help but want to laugh. If it went according to the plot, the spider mother would get her soul, and the little spider would get the body. Hee hee, would the big spider mother be able to swallow her soul, and would the little spider be able to get the body? That scene would be quite interesting. Let's see if the little spider could still wear a human body and walk the world as a monster. In that case, he still had to go through the plot. After Ning Shu accepted the plot, he exhaled and pinched his own body. Fake. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3846. The fake body was pretty good too. This way, she could do whatever she wanted with this driver, he. He didn't know if the client's soul was in Spider-Girl's body, digested, or left in her body. There were many skeletons in Spider-Girl's body. When she was injured by the exorcist, she took out many bones from her body. It was obvious that she ate people into her body. I saved you from the demon's mouth, but you pushed me into the demon's mouth. Although the client fell into Spider-Girl's mouth because the small spiders cut off the spider silk, the client's fate must have been promoted in many ways. The human heart was complicated, not to mention a monster. A monster that fed on humans to increase its strength. Rueji, don't sleep here. You might catch a cold. The owner, Yanzhou, pushed Ning Shu. Ning Shu looked up at Yanzhou. Yanzhou looked quite gentle and had a scholarly aura. In this era of the internet, opening a bookstore was not profitable at all. It was even a business that couldn't make ends meet. After all, if it wasn't a national or government bookstore or library, it was very difficult to run. Yanzhou couldn't even afford the rent now. After all, there were phones and computers. Who would still carry paper books? It was more convenient to carry a phone. Fortunately, the client's grandfather was a good person and didn't force Yanzhou to do so. The client, Ruiji, would also come to the bookstore to bicker with Yanzhou and fight for a chance to get along. Ruiji had a good impression of Yanzhou. Ning Shu glanced at him and stood up to leave. I'm not going to talk to a pervert like you. Yanzhou was given a cold stare by Ning Shu. He felt a little confused. She was probably angry when she woke up. Normally, Ruiji wouldn't treat him like that. Ning Shu walked out of the bookstore. Looking at the store's elegant name, she returned home and said to the carefree old man, "Grandpa, I think the shop downstairs has been reclaimed. That Yanzhou can't even afford the rent." The old man tapped his pipe. "What's wrong? Did he make you angry?" He didn't lack the rent, and his granddaughter seemed to be interested in him. That was why he allowed him to default. Kindness was one thing, but no one would do this for no reason. Ning Shu said directly, "We are also ordinary people. We also need to eat and drink. We are not philanthropists. If he keeps delaying, he will still have to pay the rent himself. We will also have to pay for the utilities. Because the water and electricity upstairs and downstairs were connected, they paid for the water and electricity. Yanzhou only had trouble paying the rent. No, I just feel that he's become a deadbeat. Just because you're kind, his business is so bad." Ning Shu suddenly thought of something. The little spider had turned into Ruiji's appearance. Yanzhou could be with the person he liked, and Ruiji's grandfather was Yanzhou's landlord. When the two of them were together, Yanzhou's financial problems could be solved. This was a very dark plot to begin with. There were too many guesses from all sides. The old man looked at Ning Shu. "Are you serious? Didn't you say that there aren't many people like him who are as persistent as he is?" Ning Shu rolled his eyes. "What persistent? This is inflexible and doesn't know how to be flexible. He is destined to be abandoned by the times. He is still complacent." Ha, the old man was speechless. It was hard to guess a girl's thoughts. "Are you serious? Don't be like this today and change tomorrow." What did he do? People were tolerant to people they liked. They didn't know that Yanzhou had left. "I'll talk to him." Ning Shu said, "What do you want to talk about?" "Don't talk. If you talk about it, he will take your kindness as a form of coercion. He will say that because he made me angry or because I don't like him, I became harsh to him. Your kindness in the past has turned into a pile of dog shit. Since ancient times, it had been hard to be a good person." The old man looked at Ning Shu curiously. "What's wrong with you? In the past, when I said that you liked Yanzhou, you would hurriedly deny it. Why are you so straightforward now?" A girl's mood was like this. Sometimes, she liked him, but sometimes, she really didn't like him. You couldn't guess a girl's thoughts. That's because I don't like him. That's why I can see my inner feelings. Anyway, don't look for him. I don't like him now. It'll be awkward if I expose this piece of paper. But you still have to remind Yanzhou, so that he won't continue to cling on like this and not be able to pay it back. It was not good to owe someone something. Sometimes, the person who was given alms felt even worse than the person who gave it to him. Sometimes, doing a good deed would turn into enmity. The old man said. "Why are you acting like an old man now? Okay, I'll cook something to eat." Ruiji would bring some food downstairs when he was free. For example, lunch, he would make a sumptuous bento. "Eat my ass. No matter how much you eat, it's not as important as your face." As soon as the little spider appeared, Yanzhou was bewitched by the little spider's baby face. Ning Shu suspected that Yanzhou actually knew that he was bewitched. Ruiji had been very worried about Yanzhou and purposely acted like he was bewitched and dangerous in front of Ruishi. He really suspected that Yanzhou wanted the little spider to use Rueishi's identity to live in human life from the beginning. Yanzhou had never said anything like asking the client to give up his body. Well, how could he say something like that? Even if the client really liked him, giving his soul and body to another person was a very unreasonable and shameless request. Or was Yanzhou really a puppet of the spider and the spider was using Yanzhou to live in the human world? He felt that this plot was filled with too many uncertainties and too many guesses. After all, the plot was only from a god's perspective. He needed to observe to come to a conclusion. After all, it was impossible to know what other people were thinking. Because it was a fake body, Ning Shu didn't feel hungry at all. He went to the kitchen to get something to eat. Otherwise, it would be easy to arouse suspicion. However, Ning Shu suddenly realized that when he completed the mission, he had to find a suitable way to disappear and think of a legal way to die. After all, the client wouldn't come back. Once she left, Rueiji would no longer exist in this world. But in reality, Rueiji was in the original plot. Rueishi existed in his grandfather, neighbors, relatives, and classmates. So, he had to find a suitable way to die. Ning Shu looked at the old man who was smoking. He should be living with a monster. A monster that took over his granddaughter's body, called him grandfather, and would even swallow him in one bite. To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3847. After hearing his granddaughter's words, the old man went to Yanzhou and tactfully persuaded Yanzhou to change his profession. This business was really bad. To be honest, the old man was very embarrassed now. It was as if someone had borrowed his money and wanted the other party to return it. If he had known earlier, he would have done business as usual. This was so awkward. Yanzhou said that he still wanted to persist. Regarding this, the old man had nothing to say and could only return empty-handed. Seeing his granddaughter, he could only shrug awkwardly. It could only be said that it was really hard to be a good person. If you want to do it, then you have to persist. If the old man suddenly wanted to do business as usual, all the good things he had done before would be completely erased. On the contrary, it would make both sides unhappy. According to the plot, the bookshelf collapsed, and the books scattered on the ground. It was simply a disaster scene. The customer symbolically bought a book and left with an apologetic face, leaving the messy Yanzhou looking at the books on the ground. It was a mess. Yanzhou had no choice. He was very desperate. He was the only one in this shop. He was now having difficulties even with his own living, let alone hiring a staff. What could he do? He could only thicken his face and go to Ning Shu. Usually, Rueiji would go downstairs to the shop when she had nothing to do. If she wasn't talking to him, she would read by herself. Anyway, he was in the shop and could see her anytime. In these few days, Yanzhou found that Rueiji didn't come much. At first, he didn't feel anything, but now he needed Rueiji. He looked up and couldn't see her. He was a little uncomfortable. It was so messy. How long would it take him to tidy up? If a customer came and saw the disaster scene, they would turn around and leave without thinking. Yanzhou hesitated for a moment and went upstairs to ask Rueiji for help. Ning Shu had spiritual power. Of course, he knew what happened downstairs. He saw Yanzhou walking around the door with a particularly embarrassed look. Ning Shu of course took the initiative to help. After all, the little spider was released by the person who entrusted it. Probably to release the demon, someone was needed as a sacrifice. The person who entrusted it was probably such a sacrifice. The price was too high. Ning Shu wanted to follow the plot, so he had to release the little spiders. When Yanzhou was still at the door, Ning Shu opened the door and looked at Yanzhou blankly. "What are you doing at the door?" Yanzhou was a little embarrassed and said, "I want to ask you for a favor." "Ning Shu, go ahead." The two of them went downstairs. Ning Shu looked at the messy bookstore and rolled up his sleeves to start working. When Yanzhou saw this, he also started working quickly. Ning Shu tidied up the books and saw a rather old book that was filled with age. He asked Yanzhou, "Where did you get such an old book?" "I bought it from a small bookstall. I thought it would be interesting since it's so old." Ning Shu asked, "Have you opened it?" "Yanzhou, bring it back. I forgot." "Very good, this thing was destined to be released by her." Ning Shu opened the book and saw something that looked like a spell. It was a little blurry on the page. A blurry shadow crawled out of the book and moved down along Ning Shu's hand. Ning Shu grabbed the shadow. He didn't scream in fright like the person who entrusted it, and Yanzhou even laughed at him for thinking too much. The little black shadow was caught by Ning Shu, and it struggled with all its might. Ning Shu squeezed it hard, and the spider let out a sharp screech. Yanzhou heard the abrupt sound. Ning Shu asked, "What's that sound? Did you hear it?" Ning Shu showed an extremely fake smile. "No, I didn't hear it." "You heard wrong." Yanzhou made an "oh" sound. His expression was a little puzzled. Obviously, he had some doubts about his hearing system. The little spider in Ning Shu's hand was struggling hard. It even used its sharp spider legs to prick Ning Shu's hand. Unfortunately, Ning Shu was now in a fake body and couldn't even feel pain. "I'm an emotionless killer." Ning Shu squeezed hard. The little spider screeched even more sharply in pain. Yanzhou was very surprised to hear such an obvious sound. He said to Ning Shu, "Did you hear it?" "I heard it." Ning Shu nodded. "You should clean the shop. There are rats. Don't let them gnaw on the bookshelves and books." "Rats?" Yanzhou's face was a little green. It was a disaster to think that his shop could be visited by rats. Ning Shu squeezed the spider in his hand enough. He didn't want to kill it. Letting go of his hand, the spider's shadow hurriedly fled and hid in the storage room. Ning Shu watched the little spider go inside. He expressionlessly withdrew his gaze and began to organize the books. He said to Yanzhou, "I helped you so much. How are you going to repay me?" Yanzhou froze for a moment and asked, "How do you want me to repay you?" Ning Shu rolled his eyes in his heart. Shouldn't friends thank each other when they helped each other? Was it natural? Anything. Just treat me to something to eat or drink. It's so hard and tiring. Was it easy to sort out such a messy situation? He was thinking too much. "Okay, you can eat whatever you want. I'll treat you." Yanzhou was a little embarrassed and said. Ning Shu said bluntly, "My food is expensive. Can you afford it? Your business isn't good now. You can't even pay the rent." Yanzhou was even more embarrassed. He scratched his head and said, "That's true. I can't afford it. I can only treat you to something cheap." Ning Shu looked at Yanzhou and laughed. He narrowed his eyes. He looked very cheerful and didn't hold a grudge. But the human heart was like the sun. It was an existence that couldn't be looked at directly. Yanzhou carried some things into the storage room. He accidentally knocked something over and found that there was a child in the storage room. Ning Shu heard the noise and immediately went to the storage room. The child saw someone and hurriedly crawled inside. Yanzhou grabbed the child. The child turned around and covered his face. Yanzhou asked where the child came from. The child revealed a cute little face. In that moment, it hit Yanzhou's heart. Ning Shu realized that two blushes had appeared on Yanzhou's face. Clearly, he liked the little spider's appearance very much. In fact, there might be a hidden plot in this plot. Yanzhou might be the next life of the exorcist. In that life, the exorcist had carefully reformed the little spider. During this process, it was unknown if he had been bewitched or controlled by the little spider. After all, exorcists were much stronger than ordinary people. At that time, the little spider didn't know how to restrain itself and ate people in front of the exorcist. In the end, the exorcist used his life to seal the little spider. Regarding this, Ning Shu still felt that the exorcist had been bewitched to a certain extent. Otherwise, why would he seal the little spider instead of killing it directly? If it was the little spider's mother, Spider Lady, who was a great demon and a very powerful existence, it would be fine if he couldn't kill her, but she was just a little spider. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 38-48. There were too many doubts. Perhaps it was because of this that Yanzhou liked the little spider very much when he saw it. Yanzhou stretched out his hand towards the pitiful and ignorant little spider, gently telling the little spider not to be afraid. The little spider reached out and put its sharp spider leg on Yanzhou's palm. Yanzhou was stunned when he saw the spider leg, but he still held it. Ning Shu looked at it indifferently and was not scared. He said, "This child is a monster." Yanzhou said, "She's just a child." Ning Shu looked at Yanzhou's overflowing lowly heart and said, like in the plot, "She's a monster and may bring disaster to the world. I think we should send her away." Hearing this, the little spider's face became even more pitiful. It even trembled, as if it was a little afraid of Ning Shu. It did not dare to bare its teeth at Ning Shu. In the plot, because the client wanted to send the monster away or seal it, it was tit for tat. However, the little spider and Yanzhou got along very well. This was probably the tit for tat between two love rivals. It often played tricks on the client, and the client was not wronged. After all, it was a person who talked about sealing it or sending it away every day. It was polite not to eat it in one bite. The little spider that broke out of the seal was much smarter. The reason it was sealed was that the little spider ate a person. The exorcist also saw that the little spider was difficult to train. It was useless to reform it for such a long time. At the last moment, the little spider was sealed. Yanzhou planned to raise this little mushroom cool, and the kind that would last for a long time. He planned to raise it, and it was to raise a monster. He probably felt that he could change a monster. It was because the child was too small and too cute. It lowered people's vigilance. Even if it was a monster, it was still a child. Ning Shu persuaded as usual, but Yanzhou's expression was very firm. He was very kind to the little monster and had a very good attitude. At least, the client did not feel this gentleness. There was no other way. After all, Yanzhou didn't like the client. He couldn't use this to criticize Yanzhou. Ruiji did not listen to Yanzhou's advice. Firstly, he was concerned about his safety. Secondly, he felt a deep sense of disparity from Yanzhou's attitude towards the little monsters. The person she liked another person. How frustrating. Ning Shu said coldly, "I don't care how you deal with this monster, but you can't leave it here. I don't want a monster living downstairs." Yanzhou had always lived in the store. Renting another house would be a huge financial burden for Yanzhou. Yanzhou's expression became very awkward. Looking at the cute Lolita, he felt embarrassed. Yanzhou had no choice but to beg Ning Shu. "Ruiji, can you let this child stay here for my sake? I promise he won't cause any trouble." Although the old book had detailed the origin of the little spider and the situation of the spider lady, looking at this little Lolita, there was no way to connect it with those. Ning Shu snorted. "Don't forget that they are man-eating monsters. They especially like to eat men. If you stay, they might eat people. There's always a man. And you're also a man. Do you think you're very powerful? Even an exorcist couldn't tame her monster nature. You're a weak person. You can deal with monsters." It was really an inexplicable sense of self-confidence and the thought of greatness that had raped his brain. Yanzhou was speechless. Holding the little spider's leg, he silently expressed his decision. Ning Shu couldn't be bothered with him. He said indifferently, if you want to raise her, then raise her. Don't do it in my house. Ruiji, I'll take good care of her. How about this, I'll pay more rent. Yanzhou said. In the original plot, there was no such thing as rent. But Ning Shu wanted to talk about it, constantly reminding Yanzhou that he was poor. Ning Shu said directly, you haven't paid my grandpa rent for a long time, and you still want to pay more. Do you think you can afford it? It's already good enough that you can pay the normal rent, and you still want to pay more. What kind of unrealistic dream was that? Yanzhou's face was red. He was probably provoked by Ning Shu. He said fiercely, I'll pay more rent every month. I'll pay on time. Whatever. Keep an eye on her. If anyone goes missing, I'll immediately suspect this monster. Also, if anything happens to my grandfather, I won't let you go. Ning Shu stared at the little spider. The little spider was so scared that it hid behind Yanzhou. Following someone who could turn people into puppets under his control was truly exhilarating. Ning Shu turned and left the bookstore. Yanzhou breathed a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that Ruiji wouldn't agree. Since then, the little spider lived with Yanzhou. The two got along well. Ning Shu occasionally went downstairs to take a look. The little spider didn't dare to play tricks on Ning Shu. It was probably scared by Ning Shu when it was first released from the seal. Ning Shu looked at Yanzhou. There was a pink bubble around him. In short, he was very happy. Ning Shu glanced at him and left. Yanzhou didn't care. He was always paying attention to what was going on downstairs. Seeing that Yanzhou seemed to be confused, Ning Shu went downstairs. He picked up the teacup on the table and threw it at Yanzhou. It hit the back of Yanzhou's head. The pain woke him up. When he woke up, he was confused for a moment. Ruiji, you're here. Ning Shu said with a serious face, you were confused. Yanzhou hurriedly denied, no, I was just in a daze. Ning Shu just laughed. Yanzhou felt a little pressured. He touched the bruise on his head and hissed in pain. Ning Shu asked, are you okay? I just saw your eyes staring straight ahead, and you looked like you were about to drool. I reflexively grabbed the teacup on the table and threw it at you. Fortunately, you woke up. Yanzhou was speechless. Drooling? Drooling? Ning Shu carefully looked at Yanzhou's face. Was he pretending or was he really confused? Or was he just pretending? Ning Shu pretended to be very worried. Are you really okay? I think we should send that spider away. The little spider hid behind the door and stuck out its cute head. It looked over timidly, but it didn't dare to spit spider silk at Ning Shu. Yanzhou gently touched the bruise on his head and said, it's okay, it's okay. Before Ning Shu left, he looked at Yanzhou with an extremely worried expression. No matter what, you have to be careful. The little spider didn't dare to get close to Ning Shu. After Ning Shu left, the little spider approached Yanzhou. Yanzhou touched the little spider's head with a loving expression. Once Yanzhou showed signs of being confused, Ning Shu threw whatever she had at him. To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3849. Anyway, Yanzhou's head was full of bumps. If he was really faking it, Yanzhou wouldn't dare to act like he was confused by Ning Shu. Ning Shu was more loyal to Yanzhou. Even if he was confused, he didn't resist. He really liked Little Spider. As for whether Little Spider liked Yanzhou or not, Ning Shu was more inclined to not like him that much. Maybe she saw Yanzhou as someone she could rely on to survive in the human world. After all, Yanzhou could be considered as its food. It could open its mouth and eat it at any time. Maybe she liked him too. In short, the relationship between these three people was a little twisted. There were a lot of things mixed in. Ning Shu knew that it wouldn't be long before they went to the temple to look for Spider Lady. Ning Shu was a little eager to try, so he ran downstairs to the bookstore every day. Seeing his granddaughter being so attentive, the old man was helpless. Girls were really capricious. Previously, she said that she didn't like Yanzhou anymore. How long had it been and she changed again? She shouldn't care about these juniors. Sigh, the old man was really speechless. He just didn't care anymore. With Ning Shu's interference, the three people were quite awkward. Little Spider was a little afraid of Ning Shu. When Ning Shu talked to Yanzhou, she didn't dare to come over. Probably because of Ning Shu's silent oppression, Little Spider was like the plot, calling for her mother. Little Spider usually didn't talk much. When she said the word mother, her voice was a little shrill. This kind of depressed mood lasted for a long time. Yanzhou thought that Little Spider was homesick and said that he wanted to bring Little Spider home. Ning Shu curled his lips and nodded in agreement. The client felt that sending Little Spider home was a way to get rid of Yanzhou. He didn't agree too much. So he followed them to the deep mountains. Yanzhou brought the Little Spider and Ning Shu to an antique shop. The owner of the antique shop was an old man. Ning Shu's eyes immediately scanned back and forth between Yanzhou and the old man like a searchlight. Seeing the two familiar greeting each other, Ning Shu felt that they should know each other. Then, the chances of these two people setting up a trap for the client were very high. Furthermore, this old man also had a demon in the form of a soul. It was hiding in the house and did not come out. Perhaps this old man had reared demons in captivity, or perhaps he had been bewitched by the demons. Yanzhou asked the old man if he wanted to take the Little Spider home. The old man took out a scroll and said, "The answer you want is in here." Ning Shu rolled his eyes in his heart. He immediately took out the props. He felt that this was an act. The old man was only very knowledgeable. Furthermore, he had a demon beside him. He was very familiar with such matters and was very knowledgeable. However, the fact that he had taken it out directly made Ning Shu feel that it had been prepared beforehand. Perhaps Yanzhou had come to consult this old man in private. Moreover, at the end of the plot, when the demon in the old man's house reached out to pour tea, Yanzhou did not express any surprise when he saw the demon's hand. Obviously, he knew. There must be some dirty deal between the two of them. Yanzhou took the scroll, thanked him, and was about to leave. The old man looked at Ning Shu and said, "You stay. I have something to tell you." Ning Shu rolled his eyes in his heart. He sat down and asked, "What do you want to tell me?" The old man said to Yanzhou, "You go out. I have something to tell this girl alone." Yanzhou turned and left, saying that he would wait for Ning Shu at the door. The old man said to Ning Shu, "Did you notice that he was bewitched by the demon?" Ning Shu shook his head. "No." The old man said, "His mind was controlled by the demon. He showed that he was very infatuated with the demon and became the demon's puppet." Ning Shu still shook his head. "No. You saw it too. His thinking and logic are very clear. He is also rational. His thinking and actions are normal. A puppet is not like that. I think it's a little spider. How can it bewitch people? You're thinking too much." The old man's expression was a little indescribable. "You should know the origin of that little spider. She has also eaten people." Ning Shu said naively, "But she hasn't eaten people now. If she really wanted to eat people, Yanzhou would have been eaten long ago. She probably still has some humanity. She still misses her mother." The old man still said with a serious expression, "No matter what, it has to be a demon. The demon's nature is difficult to train. People will be bewitched unknowingly. Demons will eat people who are bewitched, so you have to keep an eye on him at all times. Don't let him be bewitched and lose his life. Bringing the little spider back this time is also a very dangerous thing. Ning Shu was speechless. You're a terrible old man, very bad. He seriously suspected that the old man was saying all this to trick people into going with Yanzhou. After all, as a girl, Ruiji could awaken the bewitched Yanzhou. Ruiji liked Yanzhou. How could she not be moved when she heard Yanzhou's name? Was it a trap? Ning Shu still said, I won't go. What danger can there be? Huh? What was that? I just saw a white shadow flash by. Ning Shu was shocked. He stood up and looked into the room. As expected, he saw the spirit of a demon, but it flashed very quickly. The old man hurriedly said, Your eyes must be playing tricks on you. Ning Shu said curiously, My eyesight is very good. Old man, did you also raise a demon? Why aren't you afraid of being bewitched? You haven't been bewitched by a demon, so Yanzhou won't be bewitched by a demon either. Of course, Ruiji in the plot didn't know that this old man was also a fan of raising demons. The old man was confused. No, what demon? No, there's a demon. My old bones are still here, but they were torn apart by a demon long ago. Demons are very cruel. Ning Shu was surprised. Old man, aren't you afraid that the demon in the room will be angry? The topic changed in a very strange direction. The old man didn't know what to say and felt very uncomfortable. The old man took a deep breath. Anyway, look after him. The demon will eat the bewitched, and the bewitched will be sent to the demon's mouth like a puppet. Ning Shu didn't care. Okay, I'll look after him. She was still curious and asked, Old man, is it that fun to raise demons? You raise demons, and Yanzhou also raises demons for fun. The old man said coldly, I don't raise demons. In this era, even if there are demons, they won't be able to survive. Ning Shu said, Oh, it's not easy for demons to live. No wonder demons are much more docile now and are willing to live with humans. The old man waved his hand and chased Ning Shu away. He entered the room with his hands behind his back. To watch the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3850. Ning Shu couldn't be bothered to look at the old man's solemn expression. Who was Yanzhou to her? She had to care about Yanzhou's life and death. But she got some information from it. Old man, I'll get even with you later. Ning Shu went out of the antique shop. Yanzhou was waiting for Ning Shu at the door. He asked, What took you so long? What did you say? Ning Shu didn't care and said, It's just some weird stuff. I didn't really understand it, so who cares? However, Ning Shu made a big discovery. She said to Yanzhou mysteriously, Guess what I saw in the room? Yanzhou didn't even guess. He shook his head and said, I don't know. I don't have good hearing. How can I hear clearly? Ning Shu chuckled. I realized. She paused for a moment. There's a monster in that old man's house too. Yanzhou gasped and asked, Really? Yanzhou's expression and reaction were a bit calm. Maybe Yanzhou already knew that there was a monster with the old man. Ning Shu looked at him in surprise. Aren't you curious about what kind of monster it is? Yanzhou said, Since we can meet the little spider, other people may also meet other monsters. It's very possible. That was true, but Ning Shu felt that Yanzhou's reaction was a bit calm. After the little spider turned into Ruiji, Yanzhou took the little spider to the antique shop. Seeing the changes in Ruiji's eyes, the old man said ambiguously, You're lucky. At that time, Yanzhou did look a bit silly. This lucky was probably said to Yanzhou. He felt that Yanzhou actually let a monster accompany him willingly. Maybe it was said to the little spider. With an identity, the little spider would have no more worries and would have a body. One had to know that the spirit body of the demon in the old man's house didn't even have a body yet. Ning Shu cursed in his heart, but he still said, "You didn't pay attention to your own safety when you brought the little spider home to find your mother." She didn't say she wanted to go with him. Yanzhou was a little surprised and asked, "You're not going?" Ning Shu shook his head. "I'm not going. Why would I go? Besides, it's fine if you send her back. You know that I don't like that little spider. We've spent so much time together on the road. She might eat me up." Yanzhou was at a loss for words. There were so many things he wanted to say that it hurt. He jokingly said, "Why aren't you worried that I'll be charmed?" Ning Shu was a little surprised. "Didn't you say again and again that you weren't charmed?" "Of course I believe you. Besides, with your relationship with Spider, she won't do anything to you." In any case, Ning Shu wouldn't take the initiative to ask to go with him. If Yanzhou insisted on letting her go, then he definitely didn't have good intentions. If not, then it could only be said that everything was a coincidence. There weren't so many tricks. Ning Shu's words were very reasonable and made people speechless. Yanzhou said, "Just take it as going to relax. I looked at the information that the boss gave me. That place is quite far." Ning Shu narrowed his eyes and snorted in his heart. Yanzhou saw that Ning Shu seemed to be really unwilling to go, so he gave up on persuading Ning Shu. The most important thing now was to send the little spider back. The little spider had been unhappy and listless all this time. When they returned to the bookstore, Ning Shu didn't change her words and said that she wanted to go with him. She looked at Yanzhou's expression and didn't seem to care that much about whether she went or not. In other words, it was possible that the old man had pushed the boat along with the current and helped Yanzhou, which was why he said, "You got off too easy." Ning Shu gritted her teeth and chuckled in her heart. The next day, when Yanzhou and the little spider were about to set off, Ning Shu went downstairs with her bag and said to Yanzhou, "I thought about it and still think that I should go with you." Yanzhou nodded. "Okay." Thus, the two of them took a car to a more remote place. On the way, Ning Shu realized that Yanzhou didn't look at the paper that the old man had given him. She asked, "Don't you need to look at the map?" "I've memorized it all." Ning Shu was speechless. She said meaningfully, "You have a good memory. Those maps were like divine runes. Who the hell could memorize them just by looking at them? If they took a fork in the road, they would definitely take it out and take a look." Ning Shu suspected that the paper was a trap. The plot only gave them superficial things. There were too many uncertainties, and it depended on what they thought. In any case, Ning Shu tried her best to think in the dark direction this time. Yanzhou and Ning Shu, who lived in the city, walked a lot of mountain roads. Their backs were sore and their legs were cramping. Finally, they arrived at their destination. This was a place with few people. The houses were very old and dilapidated, as if they had been destroyed by something. The exorcist must have destroyed these buildings during the battle with the Spider Lady. After that, the villagers of this village all moved here. After all, there was a terrifying big demon around. Although it was seriously injured and sealed, it could run out at any time. It was too terrifying. The two of them and the demon walked in the dilapidated village and came to a relatively intact house. It was a temple. The little spider became very excited. It jumped down from Yanzhou's shoulder like a wisp of smoke and quickly slipped into the house. Yanzhou saw that the little spider ran out of sight and immediately chased after it. Ning Shu walked at the back and saw that the whole house was covered with faintly discernible spider webs. Ning Shu pushed the spider webs away with his hand and followed in. After entering, he was not surprised to find that Yanzhou had been completely bewitched and had become a puppet. The little spider not far away was looking at them. To be honest, Ning Shu could not be bothered with Yanzhou. So what if he was bewitched? So what if he was swallowed by the Spider Lady? Who cares if he died? However, Ning Shu still wanted to wake Yanzhou up. He ran over and kicked Yanzhou. With a thud, Yanzhou slammed heavily into the wall and fell to the ground to wake up. Yanzhou felt that his bones were about to break. His whole body hurt. However, he reacted at this moment. But moments later, Yanzhou's expression turned blank and dazed. His eyes were empty as he walked towards the deep pool in the backyard. Yanzhou did not hesitate as he walked towards the deep pool like a puppet. There were many spider webs wrapped around his body. These spider webs controlled Yanzhou's actions. Ning Shu removed the spider webs from Yanzhou's body. Yanzhou regained some of his consciousness, but a huge spider leg extended out of the deep pool. The spider leg directly clawed at the house above the deep pool. The house had been in disrepair for many years. With the huge spider leg clawing at it, it broke apart. Ning Shu and Yanzhou's bodies fell uncontrollably into the deep pool. Just as they were about to fall into the deep pool and become the spider lady's meal, they suddenly stopped. Chapter 38:51. A spider web fell from the sky and caught the two of them in midair. A figure fell from the sky. It was Little Spider. Now, Little Spider did not look like a little lowly. Instead, she looked like a young girl. She was very beautiful. Yanzhou turned to look at Little Spider. His face revealed an intoxicated expression as if he had been charmed. Little Spider stopped the water and called out for her mother. A beautiful woman appeared in the water. If it was not for the huge spider leg in the water, the woman in the water would be filled with gentleness. She had a smile on her face as if she was welcoming her child home. One really could not tell that she was a monster. To be capricious, one had to have the ability to charm people. Little Spider and Spider Lady were undoubtedly very beautiful. They were so beautiful that one could almost overlook their nature. They were cute and adorable, beautiful and gentle. Little Spider stretched out her leg and cut off the spider web on Ning Shu's side. Ning Shu fell straight into the deep pool. Yanzhou was indifferent to Ning Shu's situation. He held Little Spider's leg and revealed an intoxicated expression. It was said that people who were charmed would become food in the mouth of monsters. Yanzhou was charmed. Logically speaking, Yanzhou would become food in Spider Lady's mouth. Little Spider might be using Ning Shu in exchange for Yanzhou's survival. Secondly, Little Spider and Ning Shu did have a grudge. Ignoring the fact that Ning Shu had pinched Little Spider until she cried out in pain, there was also the fact that they were invisible love rivals. Little Spider wanted to use her mother to take revenge. Spider Lady retracted her huge spider leg and accepted the offering from her daughter. Ning Shu fell into the deep pool. The water was very cold, but Ning Shu could not feel it. She could feel that she was being absorbed into a place. She was obviously going to be devoured by Spider Lady. Ning Shu sneered in her heart. She looked up and saw a human and a monster clenching together on the surface of the water. She felt as if her soul was being torn apart. Why was her soul plagued with so many disasters? There were always people who had bad intentions towards her soul. Ning Shu directly released a huge amount of mental energy to attack Spider Lady's mind. At the same time, he hammered Spider Lady's huge belly with one hand. Spider Lady let out a pained cry and began to counterattack, trying her best to swallow Ning Shu. Ning Shu used his mental strength as a knife and slashed at Spider Lady's abdomen. Spider Lady's body was extremely stiff. Her abdomen was like a steel plate. When the spiritual blade slashed across it, it was like slashing a steel plate, producing an ear-piercing sound. Although he was unable to slice open Spider Lady's abdomen, Spider Lady was in so much pain that she let out a sharp cry, her large spider legs flailing wildly. It caused the water in the pool to become turbulent and incomparably turbulent. The little spider looked at the pond with a confused look in its eyes. It clearly didn't understand what was going on, and it kept calling out for its mother. Yanzhou was also looking at the situation in the pool. A trace of fear appeared in his eyes. Seeing a great Yao go berserk, Yanzhou, as an ordinary human without the strength to truss up a chicken, was unable to suppress the fear and horror in his heart. At this moment, Spider Lady no longer looked like a gentle and beautiful woman. Instead, she looked like a huge and ferocious spider. The ferocious appearance of a demon would cause people to be intimidated. Ning Shu poured out a huge amount of mental strength, but condensed it into the shape of a small dagger. Ning Shu grabbed the invisible mental blade with both hands, his expression cold. In the cold pool, he swam and used the mental dagger to slice open Spider Lady's abdomen. Spider Lady let out an incomparably sharp and mournful cry. Its abdomen was cut open by Ning Shu. Immediately, a stream of green water came out, polluting the pool. The more Spider Lady moved her body, the more bones and skulls in her abdomen popped out. These bones were the bones of the men who had died in her abdomen. The pool water was polluted black and green, and a strong stench assaulted their nostrils. Spider Lady was in extreme pain. Ning Shu was suffocating in the stinky water. He constantly used his mental strength to attack Spider Lady. The physical and mental pain caused Spider Lady's condition to worsen. After being sealed for so many years, coupled with the lack of a source of power, Spider Lady's condition was not very good. If Ning Shu was an ordinary soul, he would not need to expend energy at all. However, Ning Shu's was a fake body, and his mental strength was strong enough. After all, Ning Shu's sea of consciousness was like a star's mental strength. His mental strength was enough to cut Spider Lady's body. Spider Lady's abdomen was cut by Ning Shu again and again, revealing more and more sticky and stinky liquid. Piles of white bones came out of her abdomen. One could imagine how many people this great demon had eaten. Spider Lady was in extreme pain. Since she could not beat him, of course she had to escape. This reminded her of the pain of facing an exorcist. Her daughter brought something with her. Ning Shu cut off Spider Lady's spider leg, causing her to let out an even more painful wail. "Mom, Mom!" Little Spider was at a loss. There was a trace of water in his eyes, but he did not dare to jump down because this place could seal demons. Spider Lady endured one stab after another. In the end, she became a naked, legless spider. Her full belly had become like a punctured balloon, an existence like a rag. Spider Lady's breathing was weak. Ning Shu endured the stench and swam to the shore. Sigh, it was too smelly. He could not find a place to wash. Ning Shu raised his head and looked at Yanzhou and Little Spider in midair. He let out a chuckle. Her body was dirty, contaminated by the pond water. When he laughed, he revealed his white teeth. Even if his teeth weren't that white, they were still frighteningly white against his dark face. Little Spider's expression was somewhat startled. Clearly, he did not expect Ning Shu to be able to escape from his mother's mouth. His mother had become a legless monster. Her breathing was getting weaker and weaker. Yanzhou was at a loss and at a loss. Ning Shu's mental strength condensed into a huge hand that grabbed at Little Spider. Little Spider dodged Ning Shu's mental strength and transformed into a spider as he frantically fled. Without the support of the spider web, Yanzhou fell into the pond water. Spider Lady was in her weakest state. With food delivered to her mouth, it would be a waste not to eat it. Spider Lady opened her huge mouth and bit at Yanzhou. However, Yanzhou did not appear to have been charmed at all. He did not take the initiative to give himself a wound. Instead, he fled with all his might. There were also some who died for Yanzhou. He might have been charmed, but when he was about to be eaten, such an ugly spider would have been scared awake, so he wasn't charmed now. Spider Lady had no legs and could not move. All she could do was spin on the spot. As she spun, some of her intestines and organs flowed out. Food was right in front of her, but she could not eat it. Spider Lady spat out her spider web in a bid to bind Yanzhou and drag him to her mouth. Chapter 3852. Yanzhou was entangled in the spider web and couldn't move. He was getting closer and closer to the ferocious spider's mouth. Ning Shu glanced at Yanzhou's situation and turned away coldly. If Yanzhou was really swallowed by the spider lady, she would die sooner or later. Then the two of them would encounter danger while traveling and be killed by a mutated spider. Yes, this was a very reasonable way to die. But before he died, he had to get rid of the little spider. Ning Shu ignored Yanzhou and chased after the little spider. Now he had to get rid of the little spider. No matter if you were a cute loli or a young girl, he would kill you today. He wouldn't let the little spider use Ruiji's identity to roam the world again. He was waiting for this moment to catch the two of them in one fell swoop and find a reasonable reason for his departure. The little spider fled very quickly. Occasionally, Ning Shu would spit out a large number of spider webs to block Ning Shu's progress. The spider webs were very stiff and could pierce through wooden planks and houses. Ning Shu dodged and jumped, avoiding the spider webs. The little spider was so anxious that it didn't know what to do. Despair and fear appeared in its misty eyes. The little spider had always been afraid of Ning Shu. Especially when it saw its mother being tortured so miserably by him, the fear in its heart deepened. Because its mother was so strong, a great monster. Ning Shu extended his mental power. A powerful mental power stabbed at the little spider like a sharp sword. The little spider's mental power was stimulated and it fell to the ground with a thump. Her appearance was pitiful and her face was pale. Her appearance was enough to evoke pity in people's hearts. Back then, the exorcist saw her harmless and pitiful appearance, so he kept her by his side and tried his best to reform her. But there were still men who went missing in the village. In the end, the exorcist found that a monster was a monster and its nature was difficult to tame. In order to prevent her from becoming a disaster like her mother, he finally risked his life to seal her. Now that they were out of the seal, the little spider was much more restrained and did not eat anything. In Yanzhou's mind, other than the fact that the little spider was a monster, there was nothing special about it. Ning Shu approached step by step, and the little spider retreated step by step. Her body was trembling as she was forced to the corner of the wall. She raised her head and opened her beautiful but somewhat scarlet eyes, trying to charm Ning Shu. She spat out a dense amount of spider silk. Unfortunately, her charm had no effect on Ning Shu at all. Not to mention that Ning Shu was originally a woman, the effect of a woman's charm on another woman was reduced by more than half. Ning Shu had a heart of stone, not to mention that she also had the faith halo. This thing could prevent the owner from being organized. This kind of charm couldn't even be considered a curse, so it was useless. Ning Shu dodged the spider's silk and extended countless spiritual tentacles to wrap around the small spider. The little spider was caught by an invisible binding. It couldn't break free, and it looked panicked. Ning Shu moved his neck and approached the little spider step by step. He looked even more cruel than the spider monster. He looked like a pervert who was bullying the weak. Ning Shu didn't intend to waste any more time with the little spider. He reached out his hand, wanting to break the little spider's neck and send it to reincarnation. The souls of those who ate humans were filled with black energy and sin. If they jumped into the pool of reincarnation, the pool of reincarnation would extract more soul power. The more sinful the soul, the weaker it would be after purification. If it was a little spider in this life, who knew what it would be in the next life? What was there to redeem? If he couldn't redeem it, he could just cremate it. Wait. A weak voice stopped Ning Shu. A person covered in green and purple appeared. He couldn't even walk steadily. Ning Shu turned to look at Yanzhou. Some spider silk hung on his body, and it was wet. Spider Lady was really useless. She actually didn't swallow Yanzhou. If Yanzhou was alive, he would definitely save the little spider. There was no need to even think about it. As for the people eaten by the little spider and spider lady, who would remember the dead? On one hand, she said that the dead were more important. On the other hand, she said that they should live in the present. Yanzhou was in a very bad state. The poison from Spider Lady's stomach, death energy, and yin energy had all invaded Yanzhou's body. Even if he was alive now, no one knew how long he would live. This was good too. If he was eaten by Spider Lady, it would be easy for him to be free. It was good to bear the pain and torture of his body. Sigh, brother, you're green. You're just like the Hulk. When the little spider saw Yanzhou, its tears fell. It looked as if it had been bullied and saw the person closest to it. Yanzhou gasped for breath. The stench at the tip of his nose made it hard for him to breathe. He said weakly to Ning Shu, "Yanzhou, don't kill the little spider." Ning Shu spat and said coldly, "What right do you have to ask me? She threw me into Spider Lady's mouth. Why didn't you plead for me?" Yanzhou gasped for breath. He swam in the pool and couldn't avoid swallowing some of the polluted water. At this time, Yanzhou's esophagus and organs were burning. It was as if he had drunk sulfuric acid or some kind of poison. Yanzhou had difficulty speaking. Yanzhou was speechless. He begged Ning Shu. Ning Shu's heart didn't waver. He directly used a psychic blade to cut open the little spider's neck. Green juice spurted out from her neck. It was unknown if it was blood. It splattered on the ground and corroded the wooden floor with a sizzling sound. Seeing this, Yanzhou couldn't help but touch his neck. His throat seemed to be burning even more. The little spider's vitality was tenacious. Its throat was cut open and it whimpered in pain. It didn't die immediately. It struggled in pain and tears rolled down its cheeks. It was very pitiful. Ning Shu was speechless. This scene made him feel like a pervert. Yanzhou looked at Ning Shu pleadingly. Ning Shu ignored his gaze and used a psychic blade to cut off the little spider's neck. Her head fell from her neck and rolled around on the ground. Her face was still crying pitifully. That expression was frozen at that moment. Yanzhou opened his eyes and looked at the little spider's head. His eyes rolled back and he fainted. His body and mind were already at their limits. Yanzhou fainted. Ning Shu ignored him. Instead, he placed Spider Lady and the little spider's corpses together. He took out a lighter and found some dry wood in the forest. He piled it on top of the corpses and lit it up. Since the demon had been dealt with, it was necessary to burn the demon's corpse. Especially Spider Lady. The poison in her body was very strong. Spider Lady was still conscious. She seemed to realize her fate and struggled with all her might. However, her spider legs had all been cut off by Ning Shu. She couldn't move at all. All she could do was spit out poisonous spider silk. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3853. Unfortunately, her stomach had already been destroyed by Ning Shu, so there wasn't much spider silk left to spit out. Ning Shu threw a spiritual blade towards Spider Lady's mouth. The sharp blade pierced through Spider Lady's mouth, causing her to wail in pain. Even though she was howling, Spider Lady's life force was very weak. Ning Shu lit up the firewood, and the fire gradually burned. A foul smell mixed with the smell of burning wafted out. In the fire, there were two spiders screaming and roaring, looking like they were in extreme pain. A strong gust of wind blew around, causing the flames to sway from side to side. The unconscious Yanzhou woke up and stared blankly at the fire. Looking at the corpse in the fire, he suddenly rushed towards the fire like a madman, reaching out to dig out the little spiders. Then you can just watch from the sidelines. If you want to dig, then dig. Yanzhou's hand was burned by the fire, but he couldn't do anything. He could only watch as the little spiders turned into ashes. His body trembled, and tears welled up in his eyes. He turned to look at Ning Shu. "Why are you so cruel?" Ning Shu sneered. "None of your business. So what if I'm cruel? It was me who was thrown into the deep pool. If I didn't have some strength, I would have been swallowed like the person who entrusted me. I have strength, but I punished the little spiders and spider lady." Yanzhou's body seemed to have lost its support, and he fell to the ground powerlessly, looking at the fire in a daze. His body's condition was really not good. Ning Shu asked if he wanted to go back, but Yanzhou ignored Ning Shu. Maybe it was because he was angry, or maybe he didn't hear him at all. Ning Shu didn't care if he wanted to go back or not, but if he wanted to go back, he had to go back and settle something. Ning Shu said to Yanzhou, "Since you like the little spiders so much, and seem like you want to die for her, it's okay, I'll die with you." Yanzhou turned his head to look at Ning Shu blankly. Obviously, he didn't understand what Ning Shu was talking about. Ning Shu looked at Yanzhou with pity. "You've been poisoned. Your body won't be able to hold on much longer. On top of that, the pond water was so cold. It wouldn't be long before Yanzhou would have a fever, and the poison would attack his heart. One could only imagine what kind of scene it would be." Yanzhou's expression cracked. He was obviously shocked that he was going to die. No one could be so calm after knowing that they were going to die. He might be sad that little spider was gone, but if he really committed suicide for love, he stood up shakily, but his body couldn't hold on any longer. With a plop, he fell to the ground again. He muttered, "I want to go back, I want to go back." He still wanted to live. Ning Shu had an inexplicable smile on his face. He helped Yanzhou up and said, "I'll take you to the hospital." Yanzhou couldn't hold on any longer. This time, he was very dizzy. His body was roasted by the fire, and he was on the verge of death. After making sure that the two monsters had turned into ashes, Ning Shu took Yanzhou back to the city. He threw him into the hospital and asked the doctor to torment Yanzhou. In Yanzhou's situation, even if he survived, he would be very weak and in pain. Ning Shu hummed a tune as he came to the antique shop. He walked into the shop and said to the old man with a smile, "Hey, old man, we meet again." The old man was stunned when he saw Ning Shu. Then, he asked calmly, "You're back so soon?" He stared at Ning Shu's eyes. Ning Shu blinked his eyes and asked, "Old man, are my eyes very beautiful?" The old man was speechless. Ning Shu sat down, looked around and said, "Old man, you're a guest. Why don't you give me a cup of tea?" "Huh, you're a guest. You don't come with good intentions." The old man asked, "Where's Yanzhou?" Ning Shu said, "Oh, so you really know each other. Yanzhou is so pitiful. He was almost eaten by a monster. Now he's in the hospital. It seems that he won't live for long." She said indignantly, "I told you that you shouldn't bring a monster with you. It's too scary. By the way, where's the tea? I'm thirsty after talking so much." The old man snorted. "I'm an elder, and I'm making tea for a junior. Don't you think too much?" Ning Shu sighed. "Don't you have a monster in your house that pours tea for you? I've seen it. Ask it to pour me a cup of tea." The old man looked at Ning Shu coldly. After a while, the door opened a crack. A tentacle was holding a teacup. Ning Shu took the teacup and took a sip. He looked very happy. "It seems that the monster in your house is quite docile, unlike the one in Yanzhou's house. It's a bit ferocious." The old man didn't say anything. Anyway, no matter what Ning Shu said, he had a non-committal expression. He didn't like Ning Shu. The words, "see him out," were written all over his body. However, Ning Shu didn't have any eyesight at all. He asked, "Old man, aren't you a bit selfish to keep a monster's spiritual body by your side? And you don't let the monster enter the cycle of reincarnation. You're very bad. As for me, I can let your spiritual body enter the cycle of reincarnation. That's good. It's better than not seeing the light of day. The old man suddenly looked at Ning Shu gloomily. What do you mean? Who are you? I don't mean anything. I'm a warm-hearted person. You can also call me the most beautiful exorcist. It's not a big deal to destroy the monster. I have to expiate the monster, right? Ning Shu obviously felt that the breath in the next room was a little disordered, which showed that the heart was not calm. Old man, don't you like to raise monsters? I don't care if you're bewitched by the monster's puppet, or the monster that you raised in captivity. If I get rid of the monster, you'll feel very uncomfortable. The old man raised his lips and sneered. Do you think it's willing to go with you? Ning Shu spread his hands. I'm an unreasonable person. It has to go with me whether it wants to or not. Your wishes have nothing to do with me. As for whether there was any deal between Yanzhou and the old man, it didn't matter. When he saw the soul, he should send it to the world of samsara. Ning Shu laughed mischievously. Her laughter made people want to hit her. Don't think that I don't know. You want to find a body for your monster, just like how that little spider turned into me. You're a bad old man. You still want to harm people. You'll be struck by lightning. The muscles on the old man's face twitched. Obviously, he was very angry with Ning Shu. He was trembling all over and clenching his fists. He looked at Ning Shu and asked, gnashing his teeth, what do you want? Ning Shu made a sound of surprise. Old man, what's wrong with you? I'm doing it for your own good. You've been bewitched by the monster and you're willing to be its puppet. I want you to get rid of the monster's control. Secondly, it's very dangerous for a monster to live in a human city. Maybe other people will be unlucky and be eaten by the monster. The people who will be eaten will be wronged. Thirdly, I'm kind enough to send this demon's spiritual body into the cycle of reincarnation. I won't charge you anything. Click here to view the new chapter of ZUI. Chapter 3854. The old man looked at the shameless Ning Shu and was speechless for a long time. His lips trembled, but there was nothing he could do. Over and over again, there was only one sentence, what do you want, what do you want? Ning Shu was anxious about the old man's IQ. He said so much, but the other party didn't even listen. The old man saw Ning Shu's unhappy face and asked, what do you want me to do to let it go? Ning Shu put down the teacup heavily. The tea in the teacup splashed out, and a few drops splashed on the table, making people want to wipe the water droplets off. Clang! It directly hit the old man and the demons in the room. Ning Shu said unhappily, what do you mean I won't let it go? I'm doing this for its own good. Do you think letting it live with you like this is for its own good? I'm sending it to the afterlife, not killing it. You're slandering my character, I won't be polite to you. Ning Shu looked at the old man coldly. The old man suddenly smiled, how do you feel now? Ning Shu's expression became a little incredulous, I. She clutched her stomach, you did something to the tea. No, this thing won't have any effect on you, it will only make you fall into a deep sleep. Ning Shu's body became weak. She was still full of vigor before, but now she was like a drowned rat. What do you want to do to me? Could it be that you, her expression was very ugly, you also want to take over my body? Fuck, you rotten old man. The old man, I didn't have this idea at first, but you sent it to me. You don't understand the matter between me and Wuxia at all, but you want to send it away. Ning Shu, I don't want to understand your matter at all, what does your matter have to do with me? It's really fucking disgusting, if my body is really taken over by that demon called Wuxia, I might be touched by this rotten old man. Fuck, it's worse than being taken over by a small spider. This rotten old man is bad, the client's situation was pushed by him from behind. Ning Shu clutched her stomach and looked at the old man angrily. You will regret it. The old man didn't say anything and ignored Ning Shu. He said to the room, Yuxiang, come out, you will have a body. A spirit body came out of the room. It was a beautiful woman. Even if it was a spirit body, one could still see her delicate and pretty face. Beauty was a good thing. Even if humans knew that monsters were very dangerous, they would still throw themselves at them one after another for the sake of beauty. Birds die for food and men die for wealth. It was the same for men for beauty. Beauty is a bone scraper, it can make people gladly endure. Ning Shu sneered, you old geezer, can you still do it? Demons would always be young and beautiful, but humans would grow old, get sick, and die. Yuxiang, 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 Yuxiang is, Yuxiang, 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 Yuxiang. The old man's face trembled, and he took a deep breath to suppress the irritation in his heart. You are about to die, but you are still so stubborn. It can be said that you have really stabbed the old man's heart this time. He is old and ugly now, but Yume has always been like this. Even if this body is an old man, Yume can get a younger body in the future, but what about me? In fact, from Yanzhou's body, I see my young appearance, even if I am a good match with a demon, but I will always be old. They can change one body after another. When Yume takes over this body, such a young body, standing under the sun, they will be like a grandmother and a granddaughter. Who will think that they are lovers or have some other intimate relationship? It's heartbreaking. Yume wanted to walk into Ning Shu's body, but Ning Shu said coldly, get away, I wanted to send you to reincarnation, but I changed my mind now. Yumi frowned. She didn't look at Ning Shu with ferocious eyes like the other demons. Instead, she looked at Ning Shu gently. She looked like a gentle human girl, if one could ignore the fact that she was a soul. Yume is obviously more integrated into the human world than the little spiders. She poured tea very smoothly, like an ordinary human woman, and took care of the family. They seem to live together as husband and wife. Although there is no child, there may not even be any intimate contact. It said, I will take good care of your life. Ning Shu twitched the corner of his mouth. Should I thank you for taking good care of my body? Ning Shu covered his mouth and laughed. The young girl's laughter was very pleasant, and the old man's face was very ugly. What are you laughing at? Ning Shu, nothing, I lied to you because my stomach hurts. I am not a person who can be defeated by a little demon poison. My body is fake, old man. The person who is poisoned now is Yanzhou, and he is still in the hospital. Ning Shu picked up the teacup and gulped down all the tea. You don't say, it's quite delicious. Can I have another cup? The old man and Yume's expressions became very ugly. The old man shouted at Yume, go quickly. Obviously, this guy is very arrogant and does whatever he wants. Yume is just a spirit now, and she can't beat him at all. Yume is very obedient to the old man, and she doesn't bother him too much. She turns around and runs, but when she reaches the door, she is directly bounced back. She tries several times, but it is the same. Yume can't help but feel a little desperate. She looks at the old man, and the old man looks at Ning Shu. Ning Shu laughed and said, I am here to do good things today. If I don't do good things, I won't leave. Old man, don't you like to help people? I also like to help people, so don't thank me. Help Yanzhou and the little spider achieve their wish. The old man's lips trembles. Ning Shu doesn't say anything more to the old man, because he feels that this fake body can't take it anymore. He started to fight with Spider Lady, blisters, poison, overexertion, and here he is also poisoned. He has to finish things within the limits of his body. Ning Shu points out a black hole, and the black hole slowly appears behind Yume. The dark and deep black hole makes people feel fear, as if they will never be reincarnated if they enter. Yume immediately jumps away and hides behind the old man. She doesn't look like a monster at all, but an ordinary human girl who is hiding behind the man she loves when in danger. Although this man is now a bad old man, it doesn't affect Yume hiding behind him. Seeing this, Ning Shu gave the old man a thumbs up. You're really good at teaching. Good skills. In terms of intelligence and life experience, this old man completely crushes Yanzhou, but he is old, and his body doesn't have much strength. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3855. To be able to make a monster so docile, he was even better than the exorcist. The exorcist painstakingly tried to change the little spider, but the little spider still went to eat people. He sacrificed his life to seal the little spider, but in the end, the power of the seal weakened, and the monster still escaped to the human world. No matter how the old man trained the monster, Ning Shu still admired him for being able to make the monster so docile. But he couldn't bear to scheme against her. The old man ignored Ning Shu's praise. He frowned and thought about how to make Yumi escape. But just as Yumi tried to escape, she was bounced back. It must be the power of the talisman. The old man was an experienced ancient player and had a deep understanding in this field. Although he wasn't an exorcist, he knew a lot of theoretical knowledge. Looking at the black hole, it slowly rotated. He didn't know where it led to. As long as Yumi entered it, she would be swallowed and they would never see each other again in this life. Ning Shu walked over and pushed the old man away. The old man was pushed by Ning Shu and almost fell to the ground. His body swayed and didn't fall. The old man was not as strong as the young. After being pushed by Ning Shu, he almost fell to the ground and tried to scam Ning Shu. Without the old man in front of her, Yumi suddenly felt insecure and began to tremble. Ning Shu was speechless. "Dear, are you a monster? Why do you look even worse than an ordinary woman? The way you're trembling makes me think that you're a pervert. She doesn't look like a monster anymore. How did the old man train this monster?" Ning Shu grabbed Yumi and threw her into the black hole. Don't think that you can be reincarnated just because you entered the world of reincarnation. No matter where, it was very difficult for the weak to survive. With Yumi's personality, she would probably tremble and be terrified when she entered a strange place. A monster like Yumi who relied on the old man to live didn't look like a monster at all. She was no threat to people. On the contrary, the old man was a threat to people. The old man needed to find a body for Yumi, a suitable body for her to walk under the sun and walk on the road of the human world. The situation was reversed. Ning Shu grabbed Yumi and threw her into the black hole. The old man panted as he stood in front of Ning Shu. Wait a minute, wait a minute. Ning Shu, I'm not waiting." Without another word, he threw Yumi in. The old man hurriedly used his hands to catch Yumi, but Yumi was unable to escape the suction of the black hole and was sucked in. The black hole slowly closed and finally disappeared. Ning Shu clapped his hands and called it a day. The old man sat on the ground wearily, staring blankly at the place where the black hole had disappeared. At that moment, he looked even older. It was as if she had lost the person she relied on and loved one. Tears dripped from her eyes. Well, looking at it this way, he looked more like a heinous pervert who bullied them. The old man was a person who paid great attention to his manners. He wiped his tears, got up from the ground, and said, "I've made a fool of myself." Ning Shu didn't care. He turned around and left. He didn't care about the old man's gaze. If the old man wanted to deal with her, she would send him to the reincarnation world. This time, the reincarnation location was the original reincarnation world of this world. Yumi's reincarnation location was her reincarnation world. If he separated these two people, even in the reincarnation, the next life, and the life after that, they would never meet again. After all, the reincarnation world was different. They wouldn't be in the same world. How could they meet again? The old man better not have any evil thoughts. Otherwise, she wouldn't even need to think about how to die. After finishing Yumi's matter, Ning Shu went to the hospital. The doctor told Ning Shu that Yanzhou's condition was very bad. He was probably crippled. Now, his whole body was black and swollen. He was on the verge of death. There was no way to save him. The doctor asked Ning Shu what happened to Yanzhou and how his injuries were caused. Ning Shu said, "I was traveling. On the way, I passed by a forest. He was bitten by a big spider. I guess he was poisoned." When the doctor heard this, he looked worried. He was bitten by a spider. How could he detoxify the spider's poison? There was no spider serum. In short, this patient was not easy to save. The doctor carefully asked what the spider looked like. Ning Shu said that it was very black and very big. It seemed to have mutated. The doctor's face became more worried. Modern science couldn't detoxify this kind of demon poison. In Yanzhou's situation, it would be better if there was a monster sucking the poison out for him. Otherwise, it would be a dead end. The internal organs would slowly corrode. Ning Shu looked sad and begged the doctor to save Yanzhou. Yanzhou was still so young. The doctor could only say that he would try his best. On the way back, Ning Shu went to see Yanzhou. Because Yanzhou's situation was special, he was in a ward alone. He didn't know if his condition was contagious. To be on the safe side, the doctor arranged a separate ward for him to observe and isolate him. Under the white bed sheet, Yanzhou on the bed was black as if he was burnt. Ning Shu looked away. When he got home, he found two old men playing chess under a tree by the road. When he got closer, he saw that it was the old man and the old man. When did these two people get together? Ning Shu looked at the old man. This person's mentality was really not ordinary. Not long after he sent Yumi away, he was actually playing chess with the old man. What did the old man want to do by finding the old man? The old man was the client's grandfather. If something happened to the old man, then she would lose her family. Did the old man also want to let him experience the pain of losing a family member? The old man introduced his new friend to his granddaughter and said, "He is a customs expert. He is very knowledgeable. He knows a lot of strange people and customs." Ning Shu smiled sweetly and greeted the old man like an ordinary girl. The old man's hand that was holding the chess piece was shaking. Ning Shu showed a stiff smile. Ning Shu went upstairs and looked down at the two people from the window. Knowing that Yanzhou was hospitalized, the old man gave some money to Ning Shu and asked him to take care of Yanzhou. He was also glad that Ning Shu was not bitten by a spider. In the future, it's better not to go to those places where there are few people. Although some legends and stories are exaggerated, there is still a basis. Out of humanitarian spirit, the old man took some money. The main thing was that if they went out together, others would have an accident while his granddaughter was fine. The money was also to prevent people from saying that they were cold and heartless. Ning Shu nodded and took the money. The old man was actually a little rich. The main thing was that he had a lot of houses, so he could collect a lot of money from the rent. Therefore, he didn't care much about the rent of such a small bookstore. Yanzhou's parents were not in this city, so there was no one to take care of him. To view the new chapter of Zui, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3856. Ning Shu didn't have the contact information of Yanzhou's parents, and Yanzhou had been in a coma since he entered the hospital, dying. Today, someone came to visit Yanzhou. It was the old man who came to visit Yanzhou. Ning Shu put a bouquet of flowers on the bedside, looked at the old man on the other side, and said, "I can see that your relationship is really good. Are you kindred spirits?" They were both monster owners. The old man had aged a lot. He didn't say a word to Ning Shu. He stayed at the bedside for a while and then left. Ning Shu sat by the bed and accompanied Yanzhou for a while. Looking at Yanzhou's situation, Ning Shu felt that she should inform Yanzhou's parents. She didn't want to blame it on the old man if she really died. She would definitely be dead by then. She didn't want the old man to die before his own child and end up with this kind of thing. Ning Shu found Yanzhou's phone from the drawer. She couldn't open it, so she directly used Yanzhou's fingers to try one by one to see if the fingerprints could be unlocked. Fortunately, it was unlocked. She found the contact information of Yanzhou's parents and told Yanzhou's parents about the situation. After hanging up the phone, Ning Shu casually glanced at Yanzhou, and immediately turned back to look at Yanzhou carefully. She found that Yanzhou's complexion was much better. Before, it was dark, but now his complexion suddenly improved a little. It wasn't so dark anymore. Although it was still dark yellow, it was much better than before. Ning Shu didn't believe that it was the hospital's credit. After all, the hospital could only treat Yanzhou in the usual way, and it was good enough that the usual way could keep Yanzhou's life. The old man had been here, and Yanzhou had such a change. It must be the old man's credit. Hey, this old man really hid it well. He was obviously the one behind the scenes. Now, he was absolutely certain that the situation of the client was closely related to this old man. He didn't know what method the old man used to improve Yanzhou's condition, but Yanzhou still hadn't woken up. The longer he delayed, the more damage the poison would do to his body. Moreover, it was impossible to remove all of the toxins. Even though Yanzhou was still alive, he still had to endure the pain in his body. This old man, I have to deal with him before I leave. Moreover, he had purposely approached the old man. He must have some bad intentions, or perhaps he wanted to ask the old man about his situation. How would the old man know that this granddaughter was not his granddaughter? Yanzhou's parents rushed over and saw their son lying on the hospital bed in such a miserable state, while Ning Shu, who had gone on a trip with them, was perfectly fine. Obviously, they were angry. This was also human nature. You were fine, so why should I be the one to be unlucky? Facing the eyes of Yanzhou's parents, Ning Shu stretched out his hand and said, "Please return the medical fees I paid for this period of time. Yanzhou was bitten when he wandered around, and I sent him to the hospital. I also paid for the money. Otherwise, you won't be able to see your son." Ning Shu didn't say that there was a monster. No one would believe it even if he said it. Yanzhou's parents had no choice but to return the money to Ning Shu. Although this was very reasonable, it didn't make sense. In that case, this girl was also Yanzhou's savior. But why were they so angry? It was probably because one was lying on the hospital bed, and the other was alive and kicking. The difference was too big. Ning Shu took the money and left the hospital. He bumped into the old man. Recently, the old man often came to the hospital. Every time he came, Yanzhou's situation would be better. He tried his best to save Yanzhou. It was probably because they were in the same boat. Both of them had lost the monster they liked. Ning Shu asked the old man curiously, "How did you save Yanzhou? It's so magical. Do you have something to detoxify the poison? Otherwise, it would be really difficult for a human to deal with demonic poison." The old man chuckled and said, "You want to kill him, so I have to save him." Ning Shu shook his head. "I didn't want to kill him. If I really wanted him to die, I would have just thrown him into the mountains. Why would I have to suffer and send him to the hospital?" The old man thought for a moment and said, "Maybe you don't want him to die, but you want him to live in pain." Ning Shu wanted to give this old man a thumbs up. Sometimes, people were quite talented in figuring out the dark. That was what she thought. She didn't want Yanzhou to die. She wanted Yanzhou to hold his sick body and endure the pain of losing the little spider to live on. Ning Shu shook his head. "I don't know what you're talking about. Yanzhou's death won't do me any good. The old man said, I asked your grandfather. You don't know any exorcism methods at all. It's not the exorcism methods passed down in the family. Ning Shu spread his hands. So. This old man approached the old man with such intentions. He wanted to test him. The old man rubbed his eyes and felt a little uncomfortable. It was as if his eyes were covered by a thin layer of cloth. In an instant, he couldn't see anything. The old man's voice rang in his ears. You can't see, can you? Ning Shu said, you're asking for nothing. Of course I can't see. You're really good at playing dirty. This was the second time he had played dirty with her. He really had a lot of treasures in his hands. The old man said, I worked hard to find this. I learned it after reading a lot of books. Ning Shu nodded. You're very good. The old man said coldly, what's the use of an invisible exorcist? He really knew how to break a person's proud spine. A blind exorcist who couldn't even see the figure of a monster was even worse than an ordinary person. She needed someone to take care of her. How uncomfortable must it be? Ning Shu smiled. Her eyes were shadowy and grayish-white. Her pupils and the whites of her eyes were indistinct. It was obvious that she was blind. Ning Shu reached into her bag. Under the stimulation of Ning Shu's mental strength, the surrounding cameras crackled and lost their function. She took out a shiny dagger. The old man took 2 steps back. Why? Are you angry and want to kill me? Ning Shu walked straight toward the old man. Her eyes were fixed on him and she didn't stop walking. It seemed that she wasn't blind at all. She didn't reach out and touch anything in a panic. Ning Shu stopped in front of the old man and grabbed his hand. She shoved the dagger into the old man's hand and stabbed the dagger into her own abdomen at the speed of lightning. The old man was stunned by Ning Shu's actions. He was in a daze and didn't react for a long time. When he reacted, he quickly let go of the dagger. Ning Shu fell to the ground and said to Dan Qing in her heart, leave this world. She could die perfectly. So what if she was blind? With her mental strength, she could even see the grains of sand clearly. To watch the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. Chapter 3857. Ning Shu was more worried about what if his body didn't bleed. When the dagger stabbed into his body, Ning Shu didn't feel any pain, but his face was still twisted in pain and he wailed. The people around, including the old man, were shocked by Ning Shu's wailing. Only then did the old man let go of the dagger in a panic. He looked at Ning Shu in disbelief. No one would do such a thing if they didn't play by the rules. Ning Shu covered the bleeding wound and pointed at the old man. You want to kill me?" The onlookers were shocked and rushed into the hospital. At the same time, they called the police. A stabbing incident happened at the entrance of the hospital. It was too scary. Soon, the doctors and nurses pushed the hospital bed out and rushed to send Ning Shu in for emergency treatment. Ning Shu grabbed the old man's clothes tightly. "Why are you doing this to me? Why?" The doctor used a lot of effort to pull Ning Shu's hand away. He was in so much pain, but he still had so much strength. The old man's face was wooden. He was motionless like a piece of wood and didn't care about the onlooker's eyes at all. Why? He still wanted to ask why. This person was a lunatic. He only blinded her eyes, but she didn't even want her own life. He couldn't understand at all. The old man knew that he was in trouble. He stabbed a small mushroom in public. With so much evidence, he couldn't find anything to get rid of his crime. He was clearly being held down and forced to kill someone. Ning Shu was pushed into the operating room. The doctor tried to stop the bleeding, but the blood couldn't be stopped at all. In the end, Ning Shu lost too much blood and died of shock. 10 minutes after entering the operating room, he died. The police waited at the entrance of the operating room with the old man. The old man was silent. No matter what the police asked, he didn't answer. Occasionally, he looked up at the light at the entrance of the operating room. When he saw the light go out, the light in the old man's eyes seemed to go out too. How could the rescue be done so quickly? The only possibility was that the mushroom had died. There wasn't any deep hatred between them. In fact, he didn't know her beforehand. It was just that things slowly developed to this point. The doctor said that the patient had died from excessive blood loss. The old man felt a little absurd in his heart. How could he die so quickly? It was too fast. When the police saw this, they would definitely detain the old man and ask him about the case. This was the crime of intentional homicide, which was a serious crime. The old man remained silent about his crime. Until now, he still couldn't understand why she would do this. She was so young, but she already felt that she had lived too long and didn't want to live anymore. Could it be that he hated Yanzhou that much? In order to prevent her from treating Yanzhou, he risked his own life and sent her to prison. Then, no one would be able to treat Yanzhou anymore. But there was no need for that. Rather than that, he might as well kill Yanzhou directly. There was no need for him to hurt himself and pay with his life. She was also an exorcist. The old man really couldn't imagine that just a moment's thought would cause things to go out of control. In the end, he might die of old age in prison. When the old man received the news, his granddaughter was already in the morgue. He was extremely sad and went to the police station to ask the old man why he did this. He was so heartless to kill a child. Moreover, the old man treated the old man as a friend. He didn't expect that he would lead a wolf into the house and harm his granddaughter. The old man didn't want to explain. He didn't understand his granddaughter at all. Anyway, he couldn't wash away this crime. Maybe if he really died, he could still see Yumi. He was already so old. He didn't fear death anymore. He had experienced many things in his life. Yanzhou woke up but his body was still weak. The old man who could treat him couldn't see the light of day. Although he removed a part of the poison in his body, there was still some poison in his body. However, there were still some toxins in his body. Yanzhou could only live in such a weak state. His lifespan would not be long, and the toxins would eat away at Yanzhou's life. Yanzhou woke up and found out that the old man killed Ruiji. He was stunned. What happened? Why did something like this happen between the two of them? Strictly speaking, the two of them didn't know each other. Yanzhou's parents couldn't vent their anger on Ruiji and Ruiji's family. Ruiji was dead now, but their son was still alive. Although his body wasn't in good condition, he was still alive. The old man was also angry. He took back the house and wouldn't rent it to Yanzhou anymore. He also wanted to ask for the rent he owed. Yanzhou didn't have the face to owe money. The old man was like a firecracker. He would explode with a little provocation. Moreover, he was a little guilty about Ruiji's death. Moreover, the twists and turns in this matter couldn't be explained in a sentence or two. Yanzhou came to the big city to work. However, it seemed that he couldn't keep up with the pace of the times. His business didn't make any progress. Instead, it was a loss. This time, the hospitalization and rent were enough to make Yanzhou's parents bleed a lot. Moreover, Yanzhou's body wasn't suitable to stay in the city. He was so weak that he took 3 breaths with every step. He was probably crippled. Yanzhou definitely had to go back to his hometown with his parents. Sitting in the car, Yanzhou's expression was a little dazed. He felt that everything that happened recently was as unreal as a dream. In the end, everyone didn't have a good ending. The doctor said that although he was lucky enough to wake up, his body was already damaged. He couldn't do heavy work or anything else. He could only be mediocre for the rest of his life. He was even trash that needed to be taken care of. There was also Little Spider. Her cute face appeared in front of Yanzhou's eyes. He would never see it again. Yanzhou coughed violently. His body was bent. Because the poison had corroded his throat, his voice was very hoarse. Coupled with the lack of breath, he couldn't say a complete sentence. He needed to gasp for breath. Yanzhou was probably a loner in this life. He didn't have the ability to support himself. He seemed to be disabled. Which girl would be willing to be with such a boy? He didn't know if there would be another monster like Little Spider, who was willing to stay by Yanzhou's side as a human. He lost everything. He liked Little Spider, his healthy body, and the goal he could fight for. He wasted his willpower doing nothing. Ning Shu returned to the system space and sighed. He didn't have a soul, but there was still a chance that his life could be reversed. Unfortunately, it was useless. Because he couldn't go back, and there was no next life. This client was really miserable. He was probably the most miserable person she had ever seen. The others could still go back. To view the new chapter of Zoe, please go to mobile address. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.